Hey guys, tonight we're traveling to a place so cold that your eyelashes freeze together when you blink, where boiling water thrown into the air turns to snow before it hits the ground, and where the very act of breathing feels like inhaling shards of glass. We're heading to Yakutia, officially the Sakha Republic, in the remote heart of Siberia, where winter temperatures regularly plummet to minus 71 degrees Celsius. That's minus 96 Fahrenheit for my American friends currently cozy in your 68-degree bedrooms. You're about to discover why this frozen corner of Russia holds the title of coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. And honestly, you probably won't survive what we're describing tonight without the safety of your warm blankets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Are you in sunny California at midnight? Rainy London at 5 a.m.? I love seeing how this little community spans the globe, all of us gathering in the quiet hours when the world feels a bit more intimate, a bit more honest. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the plane in Yakutsk, the regional capital, and the first thing that happens is deeply, profoundly weird. The moisture in your nostrils freezes solid. Not gradually, instantly. One moment you're breathing normally, the next your nose hairs are tiny icicles, and every inhale makes a crackling sound inside your head that nobody warned you about. It's October, technically still autumn, but the thermometer already reads minus 40. The locals consider this mild. Sweater weather, they joke, though nobody's actually laughing because talking too much means exhaling precious body heat. The airport terminal is a squat Soviet-era building that looks like a concrete bunker, which, in a way, it is. Everything here is designed for siege warfare against winter. You notice immediately that all the windows are triple-paned, sometimes quadruple, with gaps between each layer that could fit your fist. The doors are arranged in sets of 3. You pass through one airlock chamber, then another, then finally a third before reaching the actual interior. It's like entering a spacecraft, this deliberate decompression from the lethal outside to the merely cold inside. Your taxi, a battered Russian Lada that somehow still runs, idles in the parking lot with its engine running. The driver, a weathered Sakha man named Mikhail, explains without prompting that he hasn't turned off his car since November of last year. It's now October of the following year. Engine stops, engine dies, he says in thickly accented English, his breath forming clouds even inside the heated cab. He's not exaggerating. At extreme cold, engine oil becomes thick as honey, batteries lose 80% of their power, and metal components contract and crack. Most people here install engine block heaters, essentially electric blankets for car engines, and plug their vehicles in like oversized smartphones whenever they park. Those who can afford it simply never shut them off for 4 to 5 months straight. As you drive into the city proper, Yakutsk reveals itself as a settlement that shouldn't exist but does anyway, stubbornly, almost defiantly. Population, roughly 300,000 souls. That's 300,000 people who've collectively decided that comfort is overrated and frostbite is just part of the morning commute. The city sprawls across permafrost, permanently frozen ground that extends hundreds of feet deep, which creates architectural challenges that would make most urban planners weep and switch careers. Every building, and I mean every single one, sits on stilts. Not cute decorative stilts like beach houses in Florida, but serious industrial pillars driven deep into the frozen earth. Here's why, and this is where things get scientifically fascinating. If you built directly on the permafrost, the heat from your building would melt the ground beneath it. Not all at once, slowly, insidiously over months and years. The building would sink unevenly, walls would crack, foundations would buckle, and eventually the whole structure would collapse into a soupy, refrozen mess. So instead, you leave a gap, usually about 6 to 8 feet, between the building and the ground. This airspace acts as insulation, keeping the heat from the structure away from the permafrost. The effect is surreal. You're driving through a modern city where apartment blocks, schools, shopping centers, and office buildings all hover above the earth like some sort of architectural levitation act. Stray dogs, and there are many, somehow surviving in conditions that seem impossible. Take shelter in these spaces beneath buildings, curling together for warmth in the only protected spots available. Some of these dogs have developed thicker coats over generations, evolutionary adaptation happening in real time. Scientists actually study the Yakutian like a breed, an ancient dog type that has genes specifically suited for extreme cold survival, including the ability to metabolize fat more efficiently and pause with specialized blood flow that prevents frostbite. Mikhail drives you past Lenin Square, because of course there's a Lenin Square. This is Russia, after all. The statue of Lenin stands defiant against the elements, one arm raised as if commanding the cold itself to stop. It doesn't work. Someone has dressed the statue in a real knitted scarf, a splash of bright red wool against the bronze, and you're not sure if this is respectful decoration or playful mockery. Probably both. Yakutian humor tends toward the deadpan and practical. Your destination is a hotel on the city's main street, which the locals call Prospect, a word you'll hear constantly and learn means avenue. The hotel lobby features something you'll see everywhere in Yakutia, a thermometer display showing both the indoor and outdoor temperatures. Inside, plus 22 Celsius. Outside, minus 43 and dropping. That's a 65-degree differential which your brain struggles to process. You're separated from potential death by about 18 inches of walls, windows, and heating technology. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarjalana, a traditional Saka name, checks you in with the kind of efficiency that speaks to seeing confused foreigners weekly. She hands you a key, actual metal key, none of this electronic card business, and warns you about the 3 essential rules of Yakutian winter. 1. Never touch metal with bare skin. 2. Cover every inch of exposed flesh outside. 3. Never, ever go anywhere alone or without telling someone your exact route and expected return time. People die every year, she says matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather, which in a way she is. Last winter, a man from Moscow walked to the store 6 blocks away, thought he didn't need a hat because it was only 5 minutes. They found him the next morning. 5 minutes became forever. Historians note that Yakutsk was founded in 1632 by Russian Cossacks as a fort during the eastward expansion of the Russian Empire. The Cossacks were tough customers, hardened frontiersmen used to the brutal Russian winters of the Western territories. They arrived in this region, took one look at the indigenous Saka people thriving in conditions that killed unprepared Russians within hours, and basically said, well, clearly humans can live here, so we're claiming it for the Tsar. The audacity is almost admirable. The fort became a launch pad for further expansion into Siberia and eventually Alaska, making Yakutsk a crucial hub in Russian colonial history. But here's the quirky tidbit that doesn't make it into most history books. The original Cossack settlers survived their first winter largely by stealing, or if we're being diplomatic, aggressively borrowing, survival techniques from the Saka people. Russian archival records from the period include frustrated letters from military commanders complaining that their men had gone native, adopting indigenous clothing, housing styles, and even dietary practices. One particularly cranky letter from 1635 bemoans that Russian soldiers were eating frozen raw fish, like the locals, instead of proper cooked Orthodox meals. Those soldiers weren't being rebellious, they were being smart. Frozen stroganina, shaved raw fish or meat, is actually easier to digest in extreme cold and provides quick calories without requiring fuel for fires. You settle into your room, which is small but warm, almost oppressively so. The radiator clanks and hisses like a living thing, pumping heat that feels excessive until you remember that outside. Exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes. You move to the window and look out at the city sprawling below. Streetlights cast orange pools on ice-covered roads. The few pedestrians visible are so bundled that they're nearly spherical, waddling along in layers of fur, wool, and synthetic insulation that make them look like ambulatory sleeping bags. Smoke rises from countless chimneys and the city's power plant, pillars of white against the darkening sky. Yakutsk runs primarily on coal and natural gas, burning through enormous quantities to keep 300,000 people alive through winters that can last 9 months. The environmental impact is significant. Air quality in winter is terrible, with all that combustion trapped under temperature inversions, but it's a Faustian bargain the city accepts. Clean air or survival. You can't have both when it's minus 70 outside. You notice something odd about the smoke. It doesn't rise very high. Instead, It flattens out, spreading horizontally in a bizarre way. This is another quirk of extreme cold. The air is so dense and heavy that smoke and pollution can't rise through it easily, creating this oppressive layer that hangs over the city like a toxic blanket. Residents call it black sky, and it's one of the few things locals admit actually bothers them about winter. Not the cold, the pollution. Your phone buzzes with a message from your local contact, Dmitry, a researcher at the Melnikov Permafrost Institute. Yes, that's a real place, and yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. An entire research facility dedicated to studying permanently frozen ground. He's inviting you to dinner tonight at his apartment, warning that you'll need to dress properly for the 10-minute walk from your hotel. 10 minutes. You're already mentally preparing to layer on everything you've brought. But first, you need to understand something fundamental about where you are. Yakutia, the Sakha Republic, is enormous. We're talking roughly 3 million square kilometers, about the size of India, but with a population of under 1 million people. That's less population density than Antarctica if you count all the scientists on the ice shelf. Most of this vast territory is completely uninhabited, a frozen wilderness of larch forests, tundra, and permafrost that extends to depths of 1,500 meters in some places. That's nearly a mile of frozen earth. The region sits in one of the world's most extreme continental climate zones. In summer, temperatures can actually reach 35 Celsius, 95 Fahrenheit, creating a mind-bending annual temperature range of over 100 degrees. This temperature swing is among the most extreme on Earth. Scholars still debate whether this radical seasonality or the absolute winter minimums present the greater challenge to human habitation. Some argue that the constant adaptation, your body never truly acclimates because conditions change so radically, is harder on human physiology than static extreme cold would be. The Sakha people, the region's indigenous inhabitants, have lived here for centuries, possibly over a millennium, though the exact timeline of their arrival from Central Asia remains disputed among anthropologists. They brought horses with them, if you can believe it, developing a breed called the Yakutian horse that survives winter by growing a coat so thick it looks like sheep's wool, and by developing the ability to dig through snow to reach frozen grass. These horses can survive -70 without shelter. They just stand there, in the open, looking mildly annoyed while conditions that would kill most mammals in hours fail to even make them uncomfortable. You check the time, 6 p.m., already fully dark, and it's only October. By December, the sun will rise around 10 a.m. and set by 3 p.m., giving you about 5 hours of weak twilight that barely qualifies as daylight. By January, in some northern parts of Yakutia, the sun won't rise at all for weeks. Polar night. The psychological weight of that darkness is something you can't quite imagine yet. But you will. Your window is starting to fog on the inside despite the triple panes, and you can see ice crystals forming in intricate fractal patterns at the edges. You touch the glass just for a second and pull back immediately. It's cold enough to hurt through the heating, cold enough that you instinctively understand that on the other side of this thin barrier is something genuinely hostile to human life. Not indifferent, hostile. This is Yakutia. This is the place where winter doesn't just arrive. It conquers, occupies, and rules for 3/4 of the year. And tonight, you're going to learn exactly what that means, what it takes to survive it, and what happens when survival fails. The radiator clanks again. A reminder that between you and freezing death is nothing but human ingenuity, constant energy expenditure, and layer upon layer of protective barriers. Remove any of those things and the cold wins. It always wins eventually, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, you need to dress for dinner. You stand in front of your hotel room mirror attempting to transform yourself into something that can survive a 10-minute walk, and the process is surprisingly complex, almost ritualistic. This isn't just getting dressed. It's armor preparation, layering against an enemy that fights dirty and never retreats. Base layer first. You pull on thermal underwear, the high-tech kind that wicks moisture away from your skin, because here's something counterintuitive. Sweating in extreme cold is one of the fastest ways to die. Moisture against your skin conducts heat away from your body 25 times faster than dry air. Your body is essentially a furnace that burns calories to maintain a core temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, and wet clothing is like dumping water on that fire. The Sakha people understood this centuries before modern fabric technology. which is why traditional clothing used fur-worn hairside in, creating air pockets that insulated while allowing moisture to escape. Second layer, fleece or wool. You choose wool because it retains warmth even when damp, a property that's saved countless lives. Synthetic fleece works too, but there's something reassuring about a material humans have relied on for 10,000 years. Over that, a down jacket, not the fashionable puffy kind you see in city winters, but serious Arctic expedition equipment rated for -50. The jacket is so thick your arms stick out at angles, like a kid in a snowsuit. Then the extremities, which is where things get real. Your fingers and toes are the first casualties in extreme cold because your body is brutally pragmatic. When core temperature drops, your cardiovascular system executes a ruthless triage. It constricts blood flow to extremities to preserve heat for vital organs. It'll sacrifice your fingers, toes, nose, and ears without hesitation to keep your heart and brain functioning. Evolution didn't design you to keep all your parts. It designed you to survive long enough to reproduce, and you can technically do that without a few fingers. You pull on liner gloves, then heavy insulated mittens over those. Mittens, not gloves, because keeping your fingers together allows them to share warmth. Dimitri specifically texted you about this. Gloves are for temperatures above -30. Mittens are for living. You choose living. Wool socks, thick ones, then a second pair over those, then boots rated for -60. The boots are enormous, making your feet look cartoonishly large, but they're essentially sleeping bags for your feet, with multiple layers of insulation and thick rubber soles that won't become brittle and crack in the cold. You've been warned not to tie them too tight. Constriction reduces blood flow, which increases frostbite risk. A balaclava goes over your head, covering everything but your eyes. Then a scarf wrapped around that, covering your nose and mouth. Finally, a fur-lined hat with ear flaps that tie under your chin. You look absolutely ridiculous, like a child's drawing of a winter person, but you also look like someone who might survive the walk to Dimitri's apartment. Before leaving, you check your phone. -46 Celsius outside. The weather app helpfully notes, feels like -52 with wind chill. You're about to experience what -52 feels like, and honestly, there's a small part of you that's curious in a deeply stupid way. The hotel's airlock system makes sense now. You pass through the first door into a chamber that's maybe 10 degrees cooler than the lobby. Already you can feel the temperature drop. Second door, second chamber, even colder. By the third door, you're in what's essentially a freezer, maybe -10, which feels almost warm compared to what's waiting outside. This gradual transition prevents the shock of walking directly from +20 to -50, which can actually trigger dangerous cardiovascular responses in some people. The human body doesn't love sudden 60-degree temperature drops. You push open the final door and step outside. And oh no, the cold hits you like a physical force, like walking into a wall made of ice. Your first breath, even through the scarf covering your mouth, sears your lungs. The air is so cold it feels sharp, angular, like you're inhaling tiny knives. Your eyes immediately start watering, and those tears freeze on your eyelashes within seconds, creating a fringe of ice that makes blinking weird and sticky. The city sounds different in this cold. Muffled, deadened, as if you've stuffed cotton in your ears. Sound waves travel slower in cold air. This is actual physics, not imagination, and the effect is eerie. Distant traffic sounds muted and oddly close simultaneously. Your own footsteps on the packed snow sound sharp and brittle, each step a small crack in the frozen silence. You start walking, following Dimitri's directions. Straight down Prospect for 4 blocks, left at the blue building, 3 more blocks. Should take 10 minutes. You're timing it, curious if you can actually feel yourself getting colder. Block 1, you're fine actually. The layers are working. You're warm, maybe even slightly too warm from the effort of walking while wearing 15 pounds of clothing. You pass a 24-hour market, light spilling from its windows, and through the door you can see the strange sight of people shopping for groceries in full winter gear, unwilling to undress just to grab milk and bread because they'll have to bundle up again immediately. Block 2. You're noticing you're breathing more. Each exhale creates a massive cloud of vapor that instantly crystallizes, creating a personal fog bank around your head. The moisture from your breath is freezing on your scarf, building up a layer of ice. You can feel it stiffening against your face. The Saka people traditionally use scarves made from special breathable materials, sometimes layered gauze, to prevent this ice buildup while still protecting against the cold. They understood that a solid ice shield against your mouth and nose could actually block airflow and cause suffocation if it got thick enough. Block 3. Your fingers are starting to tingle despite the double gloves and mittens. Not painful yet, just aware, like they're sending gentle reminders that they exist and would prefer to continue existing. You flex them inside the mittens, trying to encourage blood flow. Here's what's happening at the cellular level, and it's simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. Your body is now in active defense mode. Your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, has activated, constricting blood vessels in your extremities to preserve core heat. This vasoconstriction is powerful, reducing blood flow to your fingers and toes by up to 90%. The tissue temperature in your fingertips is probably already down to around 20 degrees Celsius, approaching the threshold where cold injury begins. But your body has a trick, a biological failsafe called cold-induced vasodilation. When tissue gets dangerously cold, your body briefly opens the blood vessels again, flooding the area with warm blood before constricting them again. This creates a cycle, constrict, dilate, constrict, dilate, that helps prevent frostbite while still preserving core temperature. This is why your fingers alternate between numb and tingling. Indigenous Arctic peoples actually have more pronounced vasodilation responses than people from temperate climates, a physiological adaptation developed over generations. Block 4. You reach the blue building, actually more of a faded turquoise, but blue enough, and turn left. The wind picks up, and this is where things get serious. Wind in extreme cold isn't just uncomfortable, it's a force multiplier. That -46 temperature becomes -55, -60 with wind factoring in. Wind strips away the thin layer of warm air your body tries to maintain next to your skin, forcing your metabolism to work harder to replace it. A figure approaches from the opposite direction, so bundled you can't tell age, gender, or anything else about them. Just a human-shaped collection of fabric and fur, moving purposefully. You make eye contact, the only part of either of you visible, and they nod slightly. Solidarity. We're both insane enough to be outside right now. The figure passes, and you notice they're walking quickly, almost jogging. Nobody strolls in this temperature. Every second outside is a calculated risk. You pass beneath one of those elevated buildings, and even in the open air underneath, the temperature feels slightly less murderous. The structure above blocks some wind, and maybe there's a tiny bit of heat leaking through the insulation, though that seems unlikely given how serious these buildings are about preventing exactly that. A cat darts across your path and you do a double take. A cat, outside, in -46. The thing is absurdly fluffy, with a coat so thick it looks spherical, and it's moving with purpose toward one of the basement spaces beneath a building. Yakutia cats have evolved right alongside the Yakutia horses and dogs. Thicker coats, different metabolism, behavioral adaptations like finding heat sources and sheltered spaces. This cat probably has a whole network of warm spots mapped out, a survival circuit that keeps it alive through winter. Block 5, your face is the problem now. Even with the balaclava and scarf, the exposed skin around your eyes is starting to hurt. Not ache, hurt. A sharp, needling pain that signals the early stages of frostbite. When skin freezes, ice crystals form inside cells, and these crystals are sharp, jagged things that puncture cell membranes. The cells literally shred from the inside. If freezing continues, the extracellular fluid freezes too, drawing water out of cells through osmosis, dehydrating them while simultaneously filling them with ice. It's a double attack that leaves tissue damaged even if you manage to rewarm. Frostbite progresses in degrees like burns. First degree, ice crystals form on skin surface, skin turns white or pale, but no permanent damage if you rewarm slowly. Second degree, ice crystals penetrate deeper, blisters form, tissue damage occurs but might heal. Third degree, ice extends through full skin depth into subcutaneous tissue. Skin turns grayish-blue or black, tissue dies, amputation likely. Fourth degree, freezing extends into muscle and bone, complete tissue death, amputation necessary. You're nowhere near that yet. You've been outside maybe 7 minutes, but you can feel the process beginning, your body's water content responding to temperatures that shouldn't exist in a world where humans live. Block 6. Almost there. Dimitri's building should be the next one, the tall structure with green trim. Your breathing is labored now, not from exertion but from the simple act of heating air from -50 to body temperature with every breath. Your lungs are working overtime, and you can feel a tightness in your chest. Extended exposure to extreme cold can actually trigger bronchospasm, your airways constricting protectively, which is dangerous because it reduces oxygen intake right when your body needs maximum oxygen to fuel its heating efforts. There's a reason the Saka people traditionally breathed through their noses in extreme cold, even though it feels wrong because nasal passages are smaller and breathing is harder. The nose is designed to warm and humidify air before it reaches the lungs, a longer pathway that gives the body more time to condition incoming air. Mouth breathing, which feels easier, sends inadequately warmed air straight to your lungs, risking cold-induced asthma or worse. Historians still argue whether indigenous Siberians developed actual genetic adaptations to cold or simply possessed superior cultural knowledge passed through generations. Some genetic studies suggest populations living in extreme cold for thousands of years show variations in genes related to fat metabolism, thermogenesis, and even pain perception. One particularly interesting study found that certain Siberian populations have variations in the TRPM8 gene, which codes for cold-sensing receptors in the skin, potentially making them less sensitive to cold discomfort. But other scholars argue that the survival advantage came primarily from cultural technology, clothing, housing, diet, rather than biology. You spot the green trim, thank every deity you can name, and hustle toward the entrance. The building's door is another airlock situation, and you've never been more grateful for Soviet-era engineering. You practically fall through the first door, already yanking off your mittens to fumble with the second door handle. Inside the entry chamber, you can finally breathe without pain. The temperature here is probably around -5, still technically freezing but feeling like a sauna compared to outside. You climb the stairs to the 3rd floor. The elevator is broken, naturally. And by the time you reach Dimitri's door, you're sweating inside all your layers, proving exactly why moisture management is so critical out here. Dimitri opens the door before you can knock, ushering you inside with urgent gestures. Quick, quick, close the door, you're letting out the heat, he says in English with that particular Russian accent that makes every statement sound slightly accusatory. His apartment is a tiny 2-room affair, but it's warm, gloriously warm, probably 25 degrees. He keeps it warmer than most because he works from home often and refuses to wear a sweater indoors in his own apartment. You start the process of delayering, peeling off the armor that kept you alive. Your scarf comes off stiff with frozen breath, a curved shield of ice-coated fabric. Dimitri takes it and hangs it near the radiator to thaw. 10 minutes outside? He asks, and you nod. Good. Proper dress. I've seen tourists try in just jeans and normal jacket. Ambulance every time. He's not joking. During the brief tourist season, yes, Yakutia has tourists, people who travel here specifically to experience the extreme cold. The local hospitals treat several cases of frostbite weekly. Mostly minor, first-degree stuff, but occasionally serious. A Japanese tourist last year lost 3 toes because he wore regular hiking boots instead of proper Arctic footwear and spent 30 minutes photographing the frozen river. 30 minutes. The toes turned black within hours, and even emergency rewarming couldn't save them. Tea. Dimitri offers, which is the universal Russian solution to everything, and you accept gratefully. While he busies himself in the kitchen, you examine your face in the hallway mirror. Your cheeks are flushed, bright red from the cold, and there's a white patch on your left cheekbone. You touch it, no sensation. That's first-degree frostbite, the beginnings of damage. Dimitri notices and tosses you a warm, damp towel. Hold on the white spot, gentle. Don't rub. Rub breaks the ice crystals through cells. Just warm, slow. You press the towel to your face, and the warming skin tingles intensely, thousands of nerve endings coming back online and complaining about their recent treatment. This is the paradox of cold injury recovery. The rewarming hurts worse than the freezing. Much worse. People with serious frostbite often report that the thawing process is the most painful experience of their lives, Worse than broken bones, worse than childbirth according to some who've experienced both. The pain comes from multiple sources. Damaged nerve endings firing chaotically, inflammatory responses flooding injured tissue, and reperfusion injury. When blood suddenly returns to oxygen-starved tissue, it creates reactive oxygen species that cause additional damage. It's possible to survive the freezing but die from complications during rewarming if it's done incorrectly. Dmitry returns with tea in a glass held in a traditional Russian tea glass holder, metal with intricate designs. So, he says, settling into a worn armchair, you want to understand what -70 feels like? What kills people here? He sips his tea thoughtfully. First, you must understand, the cold here is different. Not just number on thermometer. The dry, the still, the clear sky. This makes it different from other cold places. He's right, and this is a crucial point. Yakutian cold is continental extreme cold, very different from the cold in, say, coastal Alaska or Norway. Maritime cold is wet, windy, penetrating. It feels colder than the thermometer reads because moisture and wind chill you efficiently. Yakutian cold is dry, often still, with crystal clear skies. The air is so cold it can't hold moisture, humidity near zero, which means it's actually less immediately painful than wet cold of the same temperature would be. But it's also more dangerous in a way because you can be outside in -50 and feel almost okay if you're properly dressed and there's no wind, which leads to overconfidence. People die, Dmitry continues, because they think they understand. They look at -40, -50, they dress warm, they think, I am prepared. But they don't understand that at these temperatures, small mistakes become fatal. Sweat from walking too fast? Fatal. Forgot hat? Fatal. Stop to rest? Fatal. This is not weather. This is active enemy. He's not being dramatic. At -70, exposed skin freezes in under 30 seconds. Full frostbite, tissue death in less than a minute. Your body loses heat faster than it can produce it even when properly dressed if you're not moving. Stop moving, stop generating metabolic heat, and hypothermia begins within minutes. Your core temperature starts dropping, and once it falls below 35 degrees Celsius, you're officially hypothermic, entering a cascade of physiological failures that becomes irreversible without intervention. The tea warms you from the inside, and you can feel your body relaxing, confident again in its ability to maintain temperature. Outside, the cold presses against the windows, patient and implacable, waiting for mistakes. Dmitry refills your tea and settles deeper into his chair, clearly preparing for what he considers an important lecture. You want to know real survival? He asks rhetorically. Not survival gear from REI, not modern technology. Real survival, how people actually live here for thousands of years before any of this. He waves dismissively at his apartment, the radiators, the electric lights. The Saka people, also called Yakuts, though they prefer Saka, arrived in this region somewhere between the 10th and 14th centuries, though scholars still argue whether it was closer to 900 AD or 1300 AD. They migrated north from the Central Asian steppes, bringing with them horses, cattle, and an entire cultural technology adapted for extreme conditions. What's remarkable is that they didn't just survive in Yakutia. They thrived, developing a sophisticated culture that sustains substantial populations in temperatures that kill unprepared humans in hours. First thing, Dmitry says, standing up to rummage through a closet, is understanding that everything is about layers and air. He pulls out what looks like a massive furry coat, easily weighing 20 pounds. This is Doha, traditional winter coat. My grandmother's. She is 84, still alive, still wears this every winter. You take the coat, marveling at its construction. It's made from reindeer hide with the fur still attached, but not just thrown together. This is sophisticated engineering. The coat consists of 2 layers, an inner layer with fur facing inward against the body, and an outer layer with fur facing outward. Between them, a precise air gap of maybe an inch. Air is best insulator, Dmitry explains. Not fur, not down, not modern synthetic. Dead airspace. Fur creates air pockets, many small pockets. Heat cannot move through still air. He's absolutely correct. And this is physics that the Saka people understood intuitively centuries before scientists could explain it. Air has a thermal conductivity of about 0.024 W/mK, making it one of the best natural insulators available. The problem is that air convects, it moves, carries heat away through circulation. Fur solves this by trapping air in millions of tiny pockets too small for convection currents to form. Each hair creates a barrier, and the density of reindeer fur, up to 15,000 hairs per square inch on prime winter pelts, creates an insulating matrix that's extraordinarily effective. But watch, Dmitry says, pointing to the coat's construction. Fur direction matters. Inside, fur points to body, creates smooth surface against skin, doesn't trap moisture against you. Outside, fur points out, sheds wind, sheds snow, protects the air layer. The Saka people had figured out moisture management through trial and error, understanding that trapped perspiration would freeze and destroy the coat's insulating properties. Traditional Saka winter clothing was a complete system. The Doha coat, fur pants worn fur side in, boots made from reindeer leg skin, the densest fur, and a hat covering everything but the eyes. The boots, called eterbies, were particularly ingenious. Multiple layers. Inner sock of hair fur, middle layer of dried grass, yes, grass. It compressed into an insulating layer and could be replaced daily if it got damp. Outer boot of reindeer leg skin with fur out, and finally an overshoe of tough de-haired leather. 5 layers on your feet, each serving a specific purpose. My grandfather, Dmitry says, he was herder. Reindeer herder, traditional way. He told me stories. They sleep outside in winter. Outside. -60, -70. No tent, just snow and fire and fur. He sees your skeptical expression and laughs. You don't believe? Is true. I show you method. He pulls out his phone and shows you photos from a winter expedition he took several years ago, recreating traditional Saka survival techniques. In one image, a shallow pit has been dug in snow, lined with spruce branches. A small fire burns in the center, and around it, more spruce branches create a sloped shelter. Snow is insulator, Dmitry explains, especially when you dig down into it. Temperature in snow pit may be -20, -30, even when air above is -60. Big difference. You build small fire. Not big fire, small fire. And you sleep in Doha coat, feet to fire, spruce branches between you and snow. The spruce branches serve multiple purposes. They insulate you from the snow, preventing your body heat from melting it and getting you wet. They're slightly springy, creating more air gaps. And they smell good, which matters when you're trying to sleep in -60. The small fire is crucial. A large fire would make you sweat, and sweat is death. A small fire just takes the edge off, keeps your breathing comfortable, prevents your core temperature from dropping during sleep. But you must understand wind, Dmitry continues, returning to his chair. Wind is everything. Saka people, we read wind like you read book. Wind from north, different than wind from south. Wind steady or gusting. Wind over open ground or through forest. He's describing traditional knowledge that allowed people to predict weather, find shelter, and avoid deadly situations. The Saka language has over 40 words for different types of snow and ice, each describing specific conditions with survival implications. There's wet snow, powder snow, crusty snow, wind-packed snow, melting snow, refrozen snow, graupel, clear ice, white ice, rotten ice, and dozens more. Each type requires different strategies for travel, shelter building, or water gathering. Similarly, there are numerous words for wind conditions, cloud formations, and temperature states that go far beyond what Russian or English can express. When wind comes from north, from Arctic, Dmitry says, this is Kwesweltol red wind. Very dry, very cold, kills anything exposed. But also very clear. You can see for 100 kilometers air is like glass. When wind comes from south, brings moisture, creates fog, ice fog. This is TYYM. Dangerous different way. You cannot see, you get lost, you walk in circles. Ice fog is a peculiar Yakutian phenomenon where moisture in the air freezes into suspended ice crystals, creating fog made of ice instead of water droplets. It's beautiful and deadly, reducing visibility to a few meters while the temperature sits at -50 or worse. The traditional Saka dwelling, the Uraha, was another piece of sophisticated technology. Built partially underground with thick log walls, tiny windows, and a door system that would make NASA jealous. The entrance was a tunnel, literally a tunnel dug at a downward angle into the earth, then rising back up into the dwelling. Why? Because cold air is heavy and sinks. The tunnel trapped the coldest air in its lowest point, preventing it from entering the living space. Inside, the Uraha was arranged vertically by temperature. Coldest near the floor where storage was kept, warmest near the ceiling where sleeping platforms were built. A single central fire could heat the space because the structure was essentially a giant thermos bottle, built to retain every calorie of heat. My family, we still have Uraha at our summer place, Dimitri says. In summer, we use for cool storage. In winter, if power fails, we go there. Can survive months there with just firewood and food. He pulls up more photos. A structure that looks like a grassy hill with a door, half buried in earth. Temperature outside maybe -60. Temperature inside with small fire we keep at -5, -10. From -60 to -10 with just pile of burning wood? This is engineering. Dietary knowledge was equally sophisticated. The traditional Saka diet was heavy on fat and protein, light on carbohydrates, essentially a ketogenic diet, though nobody called it that. In extreme cold, your body burns enormous calories just maintaining temperature. A person doing moderate outdoor work in -50 can burn 6,000 to 8,000 calories per day. That's 3 to 4 times normal caloric needs. You need dense, efficient fuel, and fat provides 9 calories per gram compared to 4 for carbohydrates or protein. Stroganina, frozen raw fish or meat, shaved into thin slices and eaten with salt, was a staple food. Raw meat preserves vitamins that cooking would destroy, particularly vitamin C, which prevents scurvy. The fish or meat freezes solid within minutes of being caught or butchered, naturally preserving it. You could store stroganina all winter without refrigeration because the entire region is a freezer. Just hang meat outside, and it'll keep for months. You eat stroganina? Dimitri asks, brightening. I have some. Omel fish from Baikal. Very good. Before you can respond, he's in the kitchen, returning with a wooden board, a frozen fish that looks like a solid club, and a sharp knife. He shaves off paper-thin slices of pale pink fish, arranging them on the board. Try. With salt. You take a slice hesitantly. It's frozen solid but so thin it begins to thaw on your tongue almost immediately. The taste is delicate, clean, with a richness that surprises you. The fat content is noticeable. This fish lived in cold water and packed on calories accordingly. Dimitri grins at your expression. Good, yes? This is brain food. Fat and protein. Your brain is 60% fat, needs fat to work. In winter, people eat this, drink tea with butter, think clearly. Tourists eat carbohydrates, get cold, get stupid, make mistakes. He's not entirely wrong. There's emerging research suggesting that ketone metabolism, which dominates when you eat primarily fats and proteins, might actually improve cold tolerance slightly by affecting peripheral blood vessel responses. Indigenous Arctic populations, including the Saka, maintained high-fat diets for generations, and some researchers hypothesize this created epigenetic adaptations that optimize fat metabolism for thermogenesis. Dimitri launches into a story about traditional hunting techniques, how Saka hunters could track animals across frozen landscapes by reading disturbances in snow days old, determining not just what animal passed but how long ago, whether it was healthy or injured, male or female. Snow is book, he says. Every mark is letter, and hunter who can read survives. Hunter who cannot starves. One traditional technique involved using dogs, the Yakutian Laika breed, not just for pulling sleds but as heat sources and early warning systems. Sleeping with your dog in extreme cold could add crucial hours to survival time. The dog's body heat, combined with yours inside a shared fur sleeping bag, created a microclimate that could mean the difference between waking up and not waking up. The dogs also sensed danger. Approaching predators, ice cracking underfoot, incoming weather changes, with senses far more acute than human ones. But most important survival skill, Dimitri says seriously, is community. Nobody survives alone. Never, ever alone. You travel, you tell someone where, when you come back. They wait. You don't return, they search. You go hunting, you go with partner or group. You share meat, you share shelter, you share knowledge. Westerner thinking, I am individual, I survive by myself. This thinking kills you here in one season. This cultural emphasis on community and mutual aid was formalized in traditional Saka society through various institutions. One particularly interesting practice was Allah's-based settlement patterns. Multiple families living around shared resources with understood obligations to help each other in emergencies. If your storehouse burned, your neighbors fed you through winter without question. Because next year it might be their storehouse burning and they'd need your help. There's archaeological evidence suggesting that these mutual aid networks allowed Saka populations to weather catastrophic events that would have destroyed isolated settlements. Tree ring data and ice core samples show that several extreme cold years occurred in the 16th and 17th centuries, with temperatures potentially 5 to 10 degrees colder than typical even for Yakutia. That's -80 instead of -70, the difference between barely survivable and universally fatal. Communities sharing resources and knowledge survived. Isolated individuals and families didn't. Dimitri glances at the clock. Is late. You should go before too cold. After midnight, temperature drops another 5, 10 degrees. You don't want to walk at -55. He starts helping you bundle back up, checking each layer like a parent sending a child to school. Scarf positioned correctly, mittens secured, hat covering your ears completely. At the door, he pauses. You asked earlier about what kills people. I tell you, what kills people is thinking they know. The tourist who stays out 10 minutes extra for photo. The businessman who runs from car to building without hat because it's just 5 meters. The woman who thinks, I am from Moscow, I know cold. Yakutia doesn't care where you're from. It doesn't care what you think you know. It tests you every single second you're outside, and if you fail test even once, he makes a cutting gesture. No second chance. No do-over. This is what you must understand. You nod, properly humbled, and head back into the airlock system. The 3-door descent into the cold feels more ominous now, knowing what's waiting. Through the final door, into -51. It's dropped 5 degrees since you arrived, and you start the return journey to your hotel. Walking back, you notice things you missed before. The way people move through the city with practiced efficiency, no wasted motion. The old woman shuffling to the bus stop, bundled so thoroughly she looks like a walking pile of textiles, but moving confidently because she's done this walk 10,000 times. The car idling in a parking lot, windows completely frosted over from the inside, driver waiting for someone while the engine burns gas to stay alive. You pass a monument you didn't notice earlier, a stone pillar with names carved into it. Dimitri mentioned it. A memorial to Gulag victims who died in the camps around Yakutia during Stalin's time. Tens of thousands were sent here as punishment, forced to work in mines and labor camps in these impossible conditions. Most died within months. Prisoners from Ukraine, Belarus, European Russia, places where winter meant 0 degrees, maybe -10. They arrived in -60 wearing inadequate clothing, given inadequate shelter, fed inadequate rations, and they died by the thousands. The monument stands as a reminder that this cold doesn't discriminate, doesn't care about politics or crime or innocence. It simply takes anyone not prepared, not knowledgeable, not equipped. The traditional Saka survival techniques kept people alive for centuries. Modern technology keeps 300,000 people alive today. Remove either and the cold wins. You reach your hotel, grateful and exhausted, and climb back through the airlock into warmth. Tomorrow, Dmitry has promised to show you the city's infrastructure, the engineering that keeps modern Yakutsk functioning when thermometers bottom out. But tonight, you're content to be warm, to feel your fingers and toes working correctly, to breathe without pain. Outside your window, the cold presses against the glass, patient as stone, old as the world. Morning arrives with the peculiar quality of Yakutian winter light. Not quite dawn, more like the sky grudgingly admitting that darkness can't last forever. You wake at 8 a.m. to a world still mostly dark, the sun barely a suggestion on the horizon. Dmitri is picking you up at 9 to tour the city's infrastructure, and you're already dreading the walk from the hotel entrance to his idling car. The thermometer display in the hotel lobby reads -53°C, -63°F. The receptionist, a different person than yesterday but wearing the same expression of patient endurance, wishes you good morning as if this temperature is completely unremarkable. To her, it is. This is January in Yakutsk. This is normal. Dmitri's car, a sturdy Russian UAZ, built like a tank and about as comfortable, sits in the parking lot with its engine running, exhaust creating a constant plume of white vapor that hangs in the still air. You rush from door to car, maybe 10 seconds of exposure, and still the cold finds every gap in your clothing, every exposed millimeter of skin around your eyes. 10 seconds. That's all it takes to feel genuinely threatened. Inside the car, the heater blasts at maximum, but the windows are still frosted on the inside despite the engine having run all night. Dmitri scrapes at the windshield with a plastic scraper. Moisture from breathing, he explains. Even with heat, moisture freezes faster than heat can stop it. You must scrape inside and outside both. The outside of the windshield has frost patterns so thick and elaborate they look like frozen ferns. Ice crystals that have built up layer by layer over hours. First stop, Dmitri announces, putting the car in gear with a grinding sound that suggests the transmission is not enjoying this temperature. Is heating plant. Is heart of city. Stops beating. City dies in hours. You drive through streets that are surprisingly busy for -53. Cars everywhere, all running, creating a collective fog of exhaust that hangs over the city. Pedestrians hurry along sidewalks, moving with purpose. Nobody strolling or window shopping. The few children you see waiting for school buses are bundled to the point where only their eyes are visible, looking like tiny astronauts preparing for EVA on a hostile planet. Yakutsk's central heating plant comes into view, a massive Soviet-era facility that looks like an industrial cathedral. Enormous smokestacks pump white vapor into the sky, and the building itself radiates heat you can feel even through the car windows as you approach. Dmitri has arranged a tour through a colleague, and you're met at the entrance by Sergei, a broad-shouldered engineer who looks like he could personally fight off the winter if needed. Welcome to the only thing standing between Yakutsk and extinction, Sergei says with dark humor, leading you inside. The temperature shift is immediate and intense, from -53 outside to +30 inside. Your glasses fog instantly, and you have to remove them to see anything. The plant is a labyrinth of pipes, boilers, and machinery that rumbles and hisses with barely contained energy. We burn coal and gas, Sergei explains, shouting slightly over the noise. 40,000 tons of coal per month in winter, plus natural gas. We produce steam, superheated, for 100 degrees, and send through pipes to heat every building in central Yakutsk. 150,000 people depend on this plant working every single day, every single hour. He leads you to a control room where monitors display temperature readings from throughout the city's heating network. Hundreds of data points, constantly updating. We monitor temperature in every pipe, every building connected to system. We see temperature dropping somewhere, we increase steam pressure to that zone. Is like circulatory system, yes? Heart pumps blood, we pump heat. The engineering challenge is staggering. In most cities, heating pipes run underground where they're protected from weather. In Yakutsk, running pipes underground is impossible because they'd melt the permafrost, causing catastrophic subsidence. Instead, all the heating pipes run above ground, enclosed in massive insulated boxes that snake through the city like industrial serpents. You've seen these boxes everywhere. Metal-clad rectangular tunnels running alongside streets, sometimes rising up on supports to cross roads, sometimes diving into buildings. Insulation is everything, Sergei explains. Pipes carry steam at 400 degrees. Outside is -50, -60. Temperature differential is 450 degrees. Without perfect insulation, we lose all heat before steam reaches buildings. People freeze. The insulation system uses multiple layers: inner metal pipe, thick mineral wool insulation, air gap, outer protective shell, and still loses enough heat that the boxes are warm to the touch, which is why you often see stray dogs sleeping against them. But there's a bigger engineering challenge: the permafrost itself. Yakutsk sits on permafrost that extends down 1,500 meters, nearly a mile of frozen earth. This permafrost has been stable for tens of thousands of years, creating a solid foundation. But permafrost has a quirk. It doesn't just melt when warmed, it becomes unstable in a way that's difficult to predict. Permafrost isn't solid ice. It's soil with ice crystals binding it together. The soil contains organic matter, roots, sometimes the remains of ancient plants and animals. When permafrost thaws, the ice melts but the organic matter remains, creating a waterlogged, unstable mixture that has dramatically different structural properties than frozen ground. Buildings that seem stable on frozen permafrost can sink unevenly when the ground beneath them thaws, creating catastrophic structural failures. This is why every building in Yakutsk stands on stilts driven deep into the permafrost. We drill down to stable permafrost, Sergei explains, pulling up engineering diagrams on a computer. Sometimes 20 meters, sometimes 30, until we reach permafrost that will not be affected by building heat. We set concrete or steel piles in the frozen ground. These piles become one with permafrost, frozen together. Building sits on piles. An air gap prevents heat transfer. The system works, mostly. But climate change is creating new challenges that Yakutsk's engineers are only beginning to confront. The average annual temperature in Yakutia has increased by approximately 2 degrees Celsius over the past 40 years. That might not sound like much, but for permafrost ecosystems, it's enormous. Permafrost that was stable for millennia is now beginning to thaw at the margins, creating subsidence issues in areas that were previously safe. You can see evidence of this throughout the city. Some older buildings, built before modern pile-driving standards, are tilting noticeably. One apartment block you pass has a visible lean, maybe 3 or 4 degrees off vertical. Condemned, Dmitry notes. Permafrost under foundation thawed. Building is sinking slowly. They evacuated residents last year. Will demolish in spring, rebuild properly. The city has learned from these failures. Modern building codes in Yakutsk are among the strictest in the world regarding permafrost protection. Every new structure requires extensive geotechnical surveys, monitoring systems that track ground temperature, and maintenance protocols to ensure the ventilated space beneath buildings stays cold. Some buildings now use thermosiphons, devices that actively cool the ground beneath them using the winter's cold as a heat sink, essentially freezing the permafrost even more solidly to create a buffer against warming. Scholars still debate whether Yakutsk can survive as a major city if global temperatures continue rising. Some models suggest that by 2100, permafrost in southern Yakutia could become seasonally unstable, thawing in summer and refreezing in winter, a cycle that would make building foundations impossible. Other researchers argue that even with warming, northern Yakutia's permafrost is so deep and so cold that it would take centuries to destabilize meaningfully. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere between these extremes and highly dependent on how much warming actually occurs. Sergei leads you outside to show you the pipe network up close. Even bundled up, the cold is shocking after the plant's intense heat. He points to a section where a pipe enters a building. See here? Pipe must enter building but not transfer heat to ground. We use special penetration, insulated, floating connection. Pipe can move, expands and contracts with temperature, but doesn't touch any structure that touches ground. Thermal expansion is another challenge. Metal pipes carrying 400-degree steam expand significantly when heated. A 100-meter section of pipe can expand by several centimeters. The entire pipe network has expansion joints, flexible sections that accordion to accommodate this movement. In winter, when the pipes are hottest and the air coldest, the expansion differentials are enormous, and you can actually hear the pipes groaning and creaking as metal moves against metal. Water supply is equally complex. You can't run water pipes underground for the same permafrost reasons. Instead, water pipes run in the same above-ground boxes as the heating pipes. The heat from the steam pipes keeps the water pipes from freezing, a symbiotic relationship. Fresh water flows in one pipe, used water returns in another, and steam heat wraps around both. If steam stops, Sergei says grimly, Water pipes freeze in maybe 30 minutes. Burst from ice expansion. Entire city water system destroyed. This happened once, in 1985. Power failure stopped steam pumps. By time we got back up running, we had pipes bursting across whole city. Took months to repair. That 1985 incident is still remembered as Yakutsk's closest brush with total infrastructure collapse. A substation fire knocked out power to the heating plant for 4 hours. Steam production dropped, pipes began freezing, and the cascade effect nearly spiraled out of control. Emergency crews worked in -62 conditions, manually starting backup generators, rerouting steam, bleeding frozen pipes before they burst. 17 people died, mostly elderly residents whose apartment heating failed and who couldn't evacuate in time. The city now has triple redundant backup systems and emergency protocols that read like disaster movie scripts. You return to the car, grateful for its marginal warmth, and Dmitry drives you to the next infrastructure marvel, a supermarket. This seems mundane until you consider the logistics of keeping fresh food available in a city where the outside temperature is colder than most commercial freezers. The supermarket looks normal enough from outside, just another elevated building. But Dmitry points out details. The entrance is a 4-door airlock system, even more elaborate than the hotel. Each door opens only when previous door closes, he explains. Cannot have 2 doors open at same time, creates cold tunnel straight into store. Automatic sensors control it. Inside, the supermarket is surprisingly well-stocked. Fresh vegetables from greenhouses in southern Russia, fish from the Pacific coast, meat from local sources. But notice the layout. No refrigerated sections for frozen food. Why would there be? The loading dock is kept at -30, warmer than outside but cold enough to keep everything frozen. Frozen goods simply sit on regular shelves. The challenge isn't keeping things cold. It's keeping fresh produce warm enough not to freeze. The produce section has heat lamps over the vegetables, and you can see moisture condensing on the plastic wrap of lettuce heads. We heat this section to maybe 15, 20 degrees, explains the store manager, a woman named Olga who appears in response to Dmitry's request for a tour. Fresh vegetables they cannot freeze. Frozen vegetables we just put anywhere. Is reversed from normal store. The delivery logistics are fascinating. Trucks arrive from southern Russia on the federal highway system, a journey that takes days even in summer. In winter, trucks are specially equipped. Heated cargo boxes, backup heating systems, emergency survival gear. Truck breaks down on highway in winter. Olga says, driver must survive maybe hours, maybe days until rescue. Every truck carries emergency supplies. Is law. The highway itself, the Kolyma Highway, locally called the Road of Bones, because of the Gulag prisoners who died building it, is maintained year-round at enormous expense. Snowplows run constantly, fighting drifts that can bury entire sections overnight. The road surface is specially designed to handle extreme temperature fluctuations without cracking, using flexible asphalt compounds that remain semi-plastic even when frozen. But here's the quirky tidbit that surprises most people. In some ways, winter actually improves transportation in Yakutia. During summer, many areas become impassable swamps when the top layer of permafrost melts. Roads turn to mud. Rivers are barriers that require ferries or bridges. In winter, everything freezes solid. Rivers become highways. Trucks drive across them on ice 5 feet thick. Swamps become traversable. The Yakutian winter road network is actually more extensive than the summer network, with temporary ice roads appearing every year to connect isolated communities. Olga shows you the store's heating system, a complex network that draws steam from the city heating plant but also has emergency backup boilers. We lose heat, we lose inventory. Millions of rubles of food, all frozen solid in hours. Cannot happen, so we plan like military operation. The store even has emergency protocols for if customers get stranded during extreme cold events. There's a designated safe area with extra blankets, emergency food, and water. 3 years ago, Olga recounts, we had sudden cold snap during day. Temperature dropped from -30 to -60 in 2 hours. Wind came up. We kept customers here overnight, maybe 40 people. Set up sleeping area, fed everyone, waited until safe to leave. Is part of being community here, you take care of people because next time might be you who needs help. This community resilience theme keeps appearing. Yakutsk survives not just through engineering but through social infrastructure, networks of mutual aid, shared knowledge, cultural expectations that you help each other because survival depends on it. The individualistic approach common in warmer climates doesn't work here. Try to go it alone and you die. Simple as that. Dmitry checks his phone and frowns. Temperature is dropping. Minus 56 now. We should go back before worse. It's only 2 p.m., but the sun is already setting. The brief period of twilight that passes for daytime in January Yakutsk ending early. You drive back through streets where lights are coming on. Every building illuminated against the gathering dark. Back at the hotel, you ask Dmitry the question that's been nagging you. Why do people stay? Why not move somewhere warmer, easier? He considers this seriously. Is home, he finally says. My family here for generations. We know how to live here, and... He pauses, searching for words. There is beauty here that nowhere else has. The cold, it makes things clean, clear. Sky at minus 60, you can see stars like nowhere else on Earth. Air so clear you see mountains 200 kilometers away. And knowing that you can survive this, that you and your people have survived this for centuries, is pride, you understand? We are people who look at minus 70 and say, is Tuesday. He's not wrong about the beauty. As night falls completely, you look out your window at the city glittering with lights, exhaust plumes rising from thousands of heating systems, the stars appearing overhead with a clarity that's genuinely shocking. The constellation Orion looks three-dimensional, stars at different depths, the Orion Nebula visible as a fuzzy patch without binoculars. Outside, in the clear minus 56 air, the cold waits, patient, eternal, and utterly without mercy. You wake in darkness, complete, absolute darkness, and for a moment can't remember where you are. Then the radiator clanks, that familiar metallic conversation with itself, and memory returns. Yakutsk, winter. You check your phone. 4:30 a.m., mid-January. Outside, the sun won't even think about rising for another 6 hours. And when it does, it'll be a weak, apologetic thing that barely clears the horizon before giving up and sliding back down. The thermometer display when you stumble to the lobby for breakfast reads minus 61 Celsius, minus 78 Fahrenheit. This is record-approaching cold even for Yakutsk, and the hotel staff are subdued, speaking in quiet voices about whether schools will close, whether city services will continue operating. There's a threshold, somewhere around minus 65, where even Yakutians start questioning the wisdom of normal life. Dmitry texts, too cold for touring. Come to Institute instead. Inside all day. We'll send driver. The driver arrives in a van that's been running since yesterday, its engine compartment wrapped in insulated blankets to retain heat. The 15-second sprint from hotel door to van is enough to make your eyes water and those tears freeze on your eyelashes immediately. Your face aches through the balaclava. 15 seconds. The Melnikov Permafrost Institute sits on the outskirts of the city, a collection of buildings that look like they're hunkering against the cold. This facility is world-famous among a very specific subset of scientists, those who study permanently frozen ground and what happens when it's not so permanent anymore. Dmitry meets you at the entrance, ushering you through the requisite airlock system and into corridors that smell like old concrete and scientific equipment. Today, he announces with the enthusiasm of someone about to share their passion. You go underground. We have tunnel system goes down 15 meters into permafrost. You will see what it means to be frozen for 10,000 years. The tunnel entrance is in the basement, through a heavy insulated door that opens onto darkness and a wave of cold that's shocking even after the outside temperature. Tunnel is kept at minus 5, Dmitry explains, handing you a heavy parka. Outside is minus 61, but tunnel is naturally minus 5, stable year-round. This is permafrost temperature at this depth. Never changes, never has changed, for thousands of years. You descend stairs carved into frozen earth, the walls glistening with ice. Emergency lights at intervals cast everything in harsh white clarity. The air smells mineral, ancient, like breathing the exhalation of geological time. 20 steps down, 30, and you're in a horizontal tunnel that extends into darkness. Maybe 3 meters wide and 2 meters tall, the ceiling and walls solid permafrost. Dmitri switches on a flashlight, illuminating the tunnel ahead. This tunnel system is over 300 meters long, dug in 1960s for research. We study permafrost structure, ice content, how it responds to temperature change. He points to the wall, where ice crystals the size of your hand protrude from frozen soil. See? Pure ice lenses, formed over millennia. Water migrated through soil, froze in layers. These ice lenses are why permafrost thaw is so destructive. When they melt, ground collapses into the space they occupied. You touch the wall solid as concrete, colder than any refrigerator. The permafrost here is a complex matrix of soil particles, ice crystals, organic matter, and empty pore spaces, all locked together in frozen equilibrium. The ice content varies from 30% to 90% depending on soil type and depth. High ice content means dramatic collapse when thawed. Low ice content means more stable ground but still problematic. Come, I show you something, Dmitri says, leading deeper into the tunnel system. You walk through passages lined with frozen earth, past alcoves where research equipment monitors temperature and ice content continuously. The tunnel temperature is consistent, noticeably warmer than outside but still well below freezing. Your breath doesn't freeze here. It just creates clouds that dissipate slowly in the still air. Dmitri stops at a wall section marked with measurement grids. This section we monitor since 1975. Temperature at this depth has increased 0.15 degrees Celsius in that time. Seems small, yes, but is enormous change for permafrost that has been stable for 10,000 years. We calculate that if temperature increases another 1 degree, just 1 degree, this depth will begin seasonal thawing within 50 years. The implications are staggering, and not just for Yakutsk. Arctic and subarctic permafrost contains an estimated 1,600 gigatons of carbon, roughly twice the amount currently in Earth's atmosphere. This carbon is locked in frozen organic matter. Dead plants, ancient peat, animal remains. When permafrost thaws, microbes wake up and begin decomposing this organic matter, releasing carbon dioxide and methane, both greenhouse gases. It's a feedback loop. Warming thaws permafrost, thawed permafrost releases carbon. Released carbon causes more warming, which thaws more permafrost. Scientists still argue about the timeline and severity of this feedback. Some models suggest it could be a major contributor to climate change by the end of this century, potentially releasing 50 to 100 gigatons of carbon by 2100. Other researchers argue the process is slower, more gradual, and that not all thawed carbon will be released as greenhouse gases. Some will be reincorporated into new plant growth or stable soil organic matter. The uncertainty is wide because permafrost is complex, variable, and difficult to study at scale. Dmitri leads you to an even more peculiar section, a storage room carved into the permafrost. Inside, shelves hold cores of frozen soil in plastic tubes, samples from across Yakutia and the broader Arctic. Permafrost time capsules, Dmitri explains. Some of these cores contain ice and organic matter from 30,000 years ago, from last ice age. We can extract ancient DNA, study past climates, even find intact cells sometimes. He pulls out one core, pointing to a dark band within the frozen soil. This is organic layer from 25,000 years ago. Mammoth steppe, grassland that covered Siberia during Ice Age. We extract DNA, find fragments of mammoth, woolly rhino, ancient horses, even plants that don't exist anymore. All preserved perfectly because frozen. The preservation quality in permafrost is genuinely remarkable. Entire mammoth carcasses have been found with flesh, hair, and even stomach contents intact after tens of thousands of years. In 2013, researchers found a mammoth with liquid blood still in its body, blood that had remained unfrozen due to special proteins that act as natural antifreeze. That mammoth had been dead for 40,000 years, yet its blood flowed when the carcass was excavated. But this perfect preservation creates an eerie thought. In permafrost, death is paused, not completed. Decomposition stops at the moment of freezing. Bacteria and viruses present at death remain viable, dormant, waiting for warmth to reactivate. There are documented cases of anthrax outbreaks in Siberia caused by thawing reindeer carcasses that had been frozen for decades. The anthrax spores reactivated when permafrost thawed during an unusually warm summer. It's strange to think, Dmitri muses, that we live on surface of frozen time. Below us, everything is stopped, waiting. Mammoths, ancient humans, ecosystems that died before pyramids were built, all just frozen, paused. And now, maybe, they begin to wake. You emerge from the tunnel system back into the Institute's basement, and even the indoor temperature feels warm after the permafrost's natural cold. Dmitri leads you to a laboratory where researchers are examining ice cores under microscopes, studying crystal structures and trapped air bubbles. One scientist, introduced as Dr. Ivanova, shows you air bubbles in ice that's 20,000 years old, literally ancient atmosphere, trapped when the ice formed. We can analyze this air, she explains in careful English, measure carbon dioxide, methane, even oxygen levels from past. Is direct evidence of past climate, not proxy, not estimation. Actual air. The ice core work in permafrost complements the more famous ice core research from Antarctic and Greenland glaciers, providing ground truth data for Siberian climate history. The psychological weight of winter darkness becomes your next subject when you join Dmitri and several colleagues for lunch in the Institute cafeteria. The conversation naturally drifts to how people cope with 3 months of what's essentially night. Yakutsk gets about 3 to 4 hours of week daylight in January, but in northern Yakutian communities like Verkhoyansk and Oymyakon, the polar night is absolute, weeks without the sun rising above the horizon at all. Is difficult, admits Dr. Ivanova. We have word for it. Korosho, no wait, that is wrong word. We have expression. Winter sadness is like your sad, seasonal affective disorder, but more. Is cultural understanding that winter makes people slow, sad, introspective. We accept this. We don't fight it like Americans do, trying to be productive and happy all time. We accept that winter is time for rest, for sitting, for waiting. But acceptance doesn't mean it's easy. Yakutia has higher rates of depression and suicide than southern Russian regions, particularly during the darkest months. The lack of sunlight disrupts circadian rhythms, suppresses serotonin production, and throws off the body's entire hormonal balance. Melatonin, the sleep hormone, gets produced whenever it's dark, which in polar night means potentially 24 hours a day. Your body thinks it should be sleeping constantly, while simultaneously your metabolism is ramped up to maximum to generate heat. The conflicting signals create exhaustion, mood disturbances, and cognitive fog. Light therapy helps, says another researcher, Yuri. Many people have special lamps, 10,000 lux, simulate sunlight. Sit in front for 30 minutes each morning. Is like medicine. Light therapy has become standard treatment for seasonal affective disorder worldwide. But in Yakutia, it's not just therapeutic, it's survival strategy. Some offices and schools have installed full-spectrum lighting throughout to partially compensate for the missing sunlight. There are also traditional coping mechanisms. My grandmother, Dmitri, shares. She says winter is when the spirit goes inside. Not bad thing, necessary thing. You spend summer outside, active, working, building. Winter, you go inside yourself, think, tell stories, repair things, plan for next year. Different rhythm, not wrong rhythm. This cultural framework of winter as a necessary pause rather than an affliction to overcome might actually be psychologically healthier than the Western approach of fighting seasonal changes. There's emerging research suggesting that accepting seasonal mood variations and adjusting life expectations accordingly produces better outcomes than trying to maintain constant productivity and cheerfulness year-round. The Saka people developed cultural practices around this. Winter was for storytelling, craft work, socializing in small groups, spiritual reflection. Summer was for hunting, gathering, herding, building. Different seasons demanded different energies, and fighting that pattern was seen as foolish. But modern life doesn't always accommodate these rhythms. Problem now, Dr. Ivanova notes. is we have modern economy that expects same productivity always. Factory doesn't stop for winter. Office doesn't close. Students must learn in January same as September. But brain and body, they follow old pattern. Creates conflict. Yakutsk has adapted some modern concessions. Schools sometimes close when temperatures drop below -55. Not because the buildings can't be kept warm, but because officials recognize that forcing children to commute in extreme cold and darkness creates unnecessary risk and stress. Some businesses allow flexible hours during the darkest months, acknowledging that productivity naturally dips. There's also the isolation factor. During extreme cold periods, people venture out only when necessary. Social interaction drops dramatically. You might go days or weeks seeing only family members or close neighbors. Humans are social animals. We need interaction for psychological health, and prolonged isolation can trigger or exacerbate mental health issues. Is why alcohol is problem here, Yuri says bluntly. People drink to cope with darkness, with cold, with isolation. Especially in villages, smaller places where is less to do, less social structure. Alcoholism rates in rural Yakutia are. He trails off, shaking his head. Is serious problem. Government tries programs, education, but is difficult when winter itself creates conditions that make drinking attractive. The connection between extreme environments and substance abuse is well documented in Arctic and subarctic regions worldwide. Remote Alaskan villages, northern Canadian communities, Russian Arctic settlements, all show elevated rates of alcoholism and associated health problems. The combination of isolation, seasonal depression, limited economic opportunities, and cultural disruption creates a perfect storm for substance abuse issues. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen Romans used? Well, historical Yakutian society had its own quirky solution for winter darkness. They wore white clothing indoors during the darkest months. White reflects what little light exists, making interior spaces marginally brighter. It sounds like superstition, but there's actual physics backing it. Reflective surfaces do distribute available light more effectively. Traditional Saka winter homes were often lined with light-colored birch bark for the same reason. After lunch, Dmitri takes you to a windowed lounge where institute staff sometimes gather. Outside, it's past 2 p.m. and the sun is making its appearance, or rather, the sun is thinking about appearing. The horizon glows orange and pink, beautiful and melancholy, but the sun never actually rises. This is civil twilight, the period where the sun is just below the horizon, providing indirect light but no direct rays. This is what we get, Dmitri says. Maybe 2 hours of this, then dark again until tomorrow. In December, we got maybe 45 minutes. Now, in January, we getting closer to sunrise. By February, sun actually comes up, stays up maybe 3 hours. By March, feels like victory. You watch the twilight glow intensify slightly, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape. The city's lights are still on. They're always on in winter, creating this surreal hybrid of natural and artificial illumination. The psychological toll of watching the sun fail to rise day after day is difficult to express to someone who's never experienced it. It feels like the world is giving up, like warmth and light are concepts that might not return. But spring, Dr. Ivanova says softly, joining you at the window. Spring is like being born again. First day sun comes back, whole city celebrates. People go outside just to stand in sunlight, even if it's still -30. We tilt our faces up like flowers. Is maybe most beautiful thing, watching city wake up from winter sleep. The psychological rebound when light returns is documented in regional health data. Depression and suicide rates drop sharply in April and May as daylight extends. Energy levels surge. People become visibly more active, more social, more optimistic. The contrast between winter despair and spring hope is so dramatic it feels almost pathological, but it's just human biology responding to fundamental environmental cycles. Outside the window, the twilight begins to fade. The sun gave it a shot, got within a few degrees of the horizon, and gave up. Darkness returns, patient and familiar. The city's lights burn brighter in response. 300,000 people refusing to surrender to the night. Tomorrow, Dmitry has promised to share stories of survival and tragedy, real cases of people who made it through extreme cold and those who didn't. But tonight, as you return to your hotel through the -61 cold, you're thinking about darkness, about the weight of perpetual night, about what it means to live in a place where winter doesn't just visit. It occupies, oppresses, and fundamentally shapes every aspect of existence. The hotel lobby feels warm and bright, almost offensively cheerful, as you strip off your layers. Outside, the temperature is still dropping. The forecast calls for -65 tomorrow. Record cold. Survival cold. The kind of cold that doesn't just threaten, it promises. The morning brings news that Yakutsk has officially hit -65 Celsius overnight, -85 Fahrenheit, tying the coldest temperature recorded in the city's modern history. Schools are closed. Businesses deemed non-essential are closed. The city has entered survival mode, and Dmitry's text confirms what you suspected. Stay inside. Too dangerous. I come to you. From your hotel window, the city looks almost deserted. The few vehicles moving create enormous vapor clouds that hang in their wake. A person walking below, someone who absolutely must be somewhere, is so thoroughly bundled they move like a cloth-wrapped automaton, each step deliberate and careful. The vapor from their breathing creates a personal fog that drifts behind them like a ghost. Dmitry arrives around noon, having driven the 15-minute journey from his apartment with extreme caution. He's carrying a laptop and several folders stuffed with papers. Today is good day for stories, he announces, settling into the hotel's small lounge area. Bad day for being outside. Good day for learning why outside is bad. He opens the first folder, pulling out photocopied documents in Russian with handwritten English translations. These are records from winter 1959, from incident you maybe know about, Dyatlov Pass. Not in Yakutia, is in Urals, west of here, but his famous case of cold killing experienced people in ways nobody fully understands even now. The Dyatlov Pass incident involved 9 experienced ski hikers who died under mysterious circumstances in February 1959. The official Soviet investigation concluded death by hypothermia, but the circumstances were bizarre. The group apparently cut their way out of their tent from the inside, fleeing into -30 temperatures inadequately clothed, leaving behind their winter gear. Their bodies were found scattered across the mountainside, some with strange injuries, fractured ribs, crushed skulls, but no external wounds. Theories have ranged from avalanche to military testing to infrasound to paradoxical undressing in terminal hypothermia. What people don't understand, Dmitry says, is what extreme cold does to mind. You know about paradoxical undressing? Is real phenomenon. Person dying from hypothermia, core temperature maybe 28, 29 degrees, they suddenly feel hot. Burning hot. They remove clothing, which kills them faster. Is documented many times. Medical examiners find frozen bodies naked or nearly naked, clothing scattered around them. The mechanism behind paradoxical undressing is still debated, but the leading theory involves the cold-constricted blood vessels in the periphery suddenly dilating as the body's regulatory systems fail. This rush of cold blood from the extremities to the core triggers temperature sensors in the skin that interpret the blood flow as heat, creating the sensation of burning up. The person, now confused by severe hypothermia affecting brain function, responds to this false sensation by removing clothing. It's one of the terminal stages before death. But there is also, Dmitry continues, what we call cold madness. English doesn't have good word. Russian is kolodno bezumi. Is not paradoxical undressing, is earlier. Is psychological break from extreme cold stress combined with exhaustion, fear, maybe beginning hypothermia. Person makes decisions that make no sense, that are clearly dangerous, but in their mind seems logical. He pulls out another document, this one a rescue report from 2003. This is case of Japanese tourist Kenji Matsumoto. He was visiting Oymyakon, you know this village? Coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth, colder even than Yakutsk. Records show -71.2 Celsius there. Matsumoto came in January, very prepared, proper gear, local guide. First day, everything fine. Second day, they go for drive to see local sights. Car breaks down. Guide says wait in car, stay warm, he walked to village for help. Car has heat, has supplies. Should be fine for 2-3 hours. Dmitri pauses for effect. Guide returns with help 4 hours later. Finds car empty. Matsumoto is gone. They find him 1 kilometer away, walking away from village, away from any shelter. He removed his hat and gloves. They find these items scattered behind him like breadcrumbs. When they catch up, he is confused, disoriented, saying he is going to the warm place. There is no warm place. Only tundra, -67, and death. They get him to hospital, he survives, but loses 8 fingers and both feet to frostbite. Later, he says he don't remember leaving car. Don't remember removing hat and gloves. Says he felt compelled to walk, that he knew there was warmth ahead. This phenomenon of hypothermic wandering or terminal burrowing is documented but poorly understood. In terminal stages of hypothermia, victims sometimes display purposeless wandering, moving away from safety toward nothing in particular. Others engage in terminal burrowing, attempting to crawl into small spaces, under beds, into closets, creating a nest-like space. One theory suggests it's a primitive mammalian brainstem reflex, the same instinct that drives hibernating animals to seek small, enclosed spaces. The higher brain functions have shut down, leaving only ancient survival programs running. Programs that might have worked for small mammals seeking burrows but are catastrophic for humans in modern contexts. Dmitri shifts to another folder, this one containing newspaper clippings and photographs. This is local case from Yakutsk, 2011. Woman named Valentina Korovina, age 43, lived here her whole life, knew cold, knew danger. She worked as accountant, lived alone, normal person. One Saturday in February, she told neighbors she was walking to market, maybe 10 blocks. Never arrived. Found next morning by street cleaning crew. Frozen to death 3 blocks from her apartment. Was sitting on bench, like she just decided to rest. The photographs show the grim discovery. A figure on a bench, snow-covered, frozen in a seated position. Temperature that night was -58. Autopsy showed blood alcohol content 0. She was sober. No medical emergency, no stroke or heart attack. She just sat down and froze. These cases of people seemingly giving up, sitting or lying down and allowing the cold to take them, appear in cold climate death statistics more often than you'd expect. Sometimes it's exhaustion, the person literally cannot continue. But sometimes, like Valentina's case, it seems almost voluntary, a surrender to the inevitable. Hypothermia in its middle stages produces a strange apathy, a disconnection from survival instinct. The cold hurts less, thinking becomes difficult, and there's a temptation to just rest, just for a moment. My theory, Dmitri says, is that she felt tired, thought I just sit for minute, and minute became 10 minutes, became forever. Hypothermia crept in while she sat, and by time she thought to stand, her body couldn't respond. Muscles don't work well at low temperature. Blood thickens, becomes viscous. She maybe tried to stand, couldn't, and then acceptance. The progression of hypothermia follows a grim timeline. At 35 degrees Celsius core temperature, mild hypothermia, you experience shivering, confusion, and loss of fine motor skills. At 32 degrees, moderate hypothermia, shivering stops, your body has exhausted its ability to generate heat through muscle contractions. Thinking becomes severely impaired, speech slurs, and you may become apathetic or even euphoric. At 28 degrees, severe hypothermia, your heart rate and breathing slow dramatically, consciousness fades, and you enter a state that resembles death so closely that medical protocol requires attempting resuscitation until the patient is warm and dead. Not just cold and apparently dead. There's a saying in hypothermia medicine: nobody is dead until they're warm and dead. There are documented cases of people surviving hours of cardiac arrest in severe hypothermia because the cold itself protects the brain from oxygen deprivation. The metabolic rate drops so low that the brain can survive on minimal oxygen. People have been successfully resuscitated from core temperatures as low as 13.7 degrees Celsius, far below what would normally be fatal. But that's in a hospital with controlled rewarming. Out in -65, there is no controlled rewarming. There's only the cold winning. Dmitry shows you statistics from the Yakutian Ministry of Health. On average, 15 to 20 people die from cold-related causes in Yakutia each winter. Most are alcohol-related, intoxicated individuals who pass out outside or become disoriented and wander. But a significant minority are sober people who made small mistakes, underestimated the cold, overestimated their endurance, had a vehicle breakdown, took a shortcut that proved longer than expected. Alcohol is dangerous because it makes you feel warm, Dmitry explains. Dilates blood vessels, brings warm blood to skin surface. You feel flush, feel hot even, but you're actually losing heat faster. His trick is lie your body tells. Many drunk people remove clothing because they feel too warm, then freeze to death while feeling comfortable. The historical record bears this out. Soviet-era archives from the Gulag system show that prisoners who had access to alcohol, either smuggled or fermented from available materials, had significantly higher mortality rates during winter transport than sober prisoners. The camps themselves were death traps regardless, but alcohol made outdoor survival impossible even for young, previously healthy individuals. One particularly haunting folder contains photographs from a 1950s gulag near Yakutsk. Prisoners stand in formation in what looks like -40 or worse, wearing thin cotton clothing, no hats, inadequate footwear. These people, Dmitry says quietly, most dead within months. Not from execution, from cold. Guards had warm clothing, heated barracks. Prisoners had nothing. Was intentional, was murder by environmental exposure. Historians still argue whether the Gulag deaths should be classified as systematic murder or criminal negligence. The Soviet archives show that camp administrators knew the mortality rates, knew that providing adequate clothing and shelter would reduce deaths dramatically, but chose not to because prisoner life was considered expendable and warm clothing was expensive. Whether that constitutes murder or merely lethal negligence is a semantic debate that matters to academics but probably wouldn't have mattered much to the frozen prisoners. The photographs are difficult to look at. Faces hollowed by starvation, bodies hunched against cold, eyes that have already accepted death. Some prisoners have wrapped their feet in rags, the only protection they could improvise. Frostbite is visible in the photos. Blackened fingers, faces with dead tissue that will eventually slough off if the person survives long enough. My grandfather, Dmitry says, he never talked about this time, but my grandmother told me he survived 2 years in camp near here. Lost 6 toes, 3 fingers. Came out weighing maybe 40 kilograms from 80. Lived to 81, but he never tolerated cold after. Even in warm apartment, he wore sweater, socks. Said he could never get warm again. Not really. This long-term psychological and physiological impact of severe cold exposure is documented in survivors of extreme conditions. Even after full physical recovery, many retain cold sensitivity, anxiety around low temperatures, and sometimes PTSD-like responses to winter conditions. The body and mind remember the trauma, remain hypervigilant against cold even when objectively safe. Dmitry closes that folder, setting it aside. More recent case, more relevant to you maybe. This is from 2018, just few years ago. German tourist, photographer, came to photograph winter landscapes. Very professional, very prepared. Had satellite phone, GPS, proper gear, informed people of his plans. Went to photograph ice formations on Lena River. Was supposed to return by evening. Didn't. The search and rescue operation began within hours. The man had followed protocols, had check-in times, and when he missed them, people noticed. They find him next morning. Dead, frozen, camera still in his hand. But here is interesting part. He is maybe 200 meters from his vehicle. 200 meters. Temperature was -62. They reconstruct what happened. He is taking photographs, very focused, loses track of time. Doesn't notice his fingers getting numb because he is wearing thick gloves. Is excited by his work. Spends maybe 2 hours out there. Thinks he is fine. The reconstruction showed that the photographer had indeed captured stunning images. The camera's memory card was intact and recovered. The last photos showed ice formations on the river, crystal structures catching low winter light. Genuinely beautiful work. The timestamps showed he'd been shooting for 2 hours and 15 minutes. When he finally decides to return to car, Dmitry continues. He discovers he cannot work the camera controls. Fingers too cold. He takes off gloves to adjust settings. This is documented in photos. You can see his bare hand in reflection in one image. Bare hand, -62, maybe 60 seconds of exposure. Fingers freeze. Frostbite, deep and immediate. He panics, tries to get to car fast. But now fingers don't work. Can't operate GPS properly. Gets turned around. 200 meters becomes kilometer of wandering. By time he finds car, hands too damaged to open door to use satellite phone. They find him leaning against car door. Frozen, phone in pocket, car keys frozen to his damaged hand. 200 meters. The margin between life and death measured in yards. The forensic analysis estimated he'd been alive and mobile for approximately 90 minutes after leaving his photography site, which means he spent an hour and a half knowing he was probably going to die, trying to save himself, getting so close to safety but unable to access it. The psychological horror of that is difficult to process. This is what kills people, Dmitry says. Not usually sudden disaster, is accumulation of small things. Staying out little too long, removing glove for moment, getting slightly turned around, panicking which makes you move faster, which makes you sweat, which makes you colder. One thing leads to next, and suddenly you are in cascade you cannot stop. Outside the hotel window, the afternoon darkness is gathering even though it's only 3 p.m. The temperature has dropped further, -67 now, approaching the all-time record. The city feels like it's holding its breath, waiting to see if this winter will break records not just for cold but for the human cost of that cold. Dmitry packs up his folders and laptop. Tomorrow, if temperature comes up enough, we try to visit Memorial. Is dedicated to all people who died to cold here. I think you should see it, should understand the names behind the statistics. After he leaves, you sit in the lounge watching the city through the window. Lights are coming on, golden and warm-looking. Each one a small victory against the dark and cold. 300,000 people in their elevated buildings, burning coal and gas, fighting the -67 with technology and stubbornness and the knowledge that spring will come, eventually, probably. But tonight, spring seems impossibly distant, a fairy tale told to children. Tonight, there's only the cold, patient and thorough, testing every seal, every barrier, every warm-blooded thing brave or foolish enough to exist in its domain. The forecast was optimistic. Temperatures would moderate to -52 by afternoon, warm enough that Dmitry deemed it safe for a brief excursion to the memorial he'd mentioned. You dress with the ritualistic care you've learned. Each layer a prayer against the cold, and meet him in the hotel lobby where he's already negotiating with the desk staff about keeping his car idling in the loading zone. The drive takes 15 minutes through streets that look post-apocalyptic in their emptiness. The few pedestrians you pass move with the hunched urgency of people who understand they're trespassing in a hostile environment. Dmitry points out a thermometer on a bank building, -54. The forecast was wrong, optimistic in the way forecasts often are when predicting moderation of extreme conditions. The memorial sits in a small park on the city's edge, a simple stone monument surrounded by bare larch trees, their branches crusted with frost. Names are carved into the stone. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each representing someone who lost the battle with Yakutian winter. Dmitry parks as close as possible, and you make the 30-meter walk to the memorial, feeling the cold penetrate your layers within seconds. Up close, you can read some of the inscriptions. Dates ranging from the 1930s to just last year. Ages from 17 to 68. Some entries include details. Froze while traveling to village, died during storm, lost in whiteout. Others just have names and dates, the specifics lost or too painful to record. This is just official memorial, Dmitry says, his voice muffled by his scarf. Real number is much higher. Many deaths not recorded, especially in Stalin time, especially indigenous people whose deaths were not considered worth documenting. You're thinking about this, about the invisible dead whose names don't appear on stone, when Dmitry checks his phone and his expression changes. We must go back. Now, temperature dropping fast, weather system moving in. -59 already. The drive back is tense, Dmitry muttering in Russian as he watches the temperature display in his car tick downward. minus 60, minus 61. By the time you reach the hotel, it's minus 63 and still falling. The forecast now calls for minus 71 by midnight, record-breaking cold, the kind that makes the news internationally, the kind that kills. Back in the hotel, the staff are preparing for the worst. You see them checking the backup generators, distributing extra blankets to rooms, preparing the lobby as a potential emergency shelter if the heating system struggles. The manager makes an announcement. Guests are advised to stay in the building, keep windows closed, and report any unusual drops in room temperature immediately. You retreat to your room, and as evening darkens into night, you watch the thermometer display in the lobby via the hotel's closed-circuit TV feed. Minus 65, minus 67, minus 69. The numbers climb downward with inexorable determination, each degree a tightening grip. This is the night you'll never forget, the night that transforms your understanding from intellectual to visceral. Because this is the night you'll imagine yourself outside, unprotected, experiencing what the people on that memorial stone experienced. Dmitri had suggested it during the drive back. To really understand, you must think through it, hour by hour. What happens? So you do. You imagine. Hour 1, minus 71. You're outside. Maybe your car broke down. Maybe you were walking and got disoriented. The why doesn't matter, you're here, and you're alone, and the temperature is minus 71 Celsius, minus 96 Fahrenheit. The first minute, you're okay. Your layers are working, your core is warm from the building you just left. You're thinking clearly. Need to find shelter, need to move, need to get to safety. You know where you are, the hotel is maybe 15 blocks away. You've walked this before. 15 minutes at a good pace. You start walking. The cold is immediate and aggressive. Despite your balaclava and scarf, each breath hurts. The air so cold it feels solid, crystalline. Your lungs ache with each inhale. The moisture in your breath freezes instantly on your scarf, building up ice that makes breathing through the fabric progressively harder. You adjust it, exposing a small patch of cheek to do so, and that patch goes numb within 5 seconds. You cover it again quickly. Your eyes are watering, an automatic response to the cold air, and those tears freeze on your eyelashes. Each blink is sticky, your lashes wanting to freeze together. You have to consciously force your eyes open, blinking hard to break the ice. This will become exhausting. 5 minutes in, your fingers inside your mittens are starting to tingle unpleasantly. The tingling is your body's vasodilation response, blood vessels opening periodically to prevent frostbite. It's painful like thousands of needles, but it's good pain, protective pain. When the tingling stops, that's when you're in trouble. 10 minutes in, you're breathing hard from the effort of walking fast while wearing heavy clothing. This is a mistake. Heavy breathing means more moisture expelled, more ice building on your scarf, more heat lost through respiration. Your body is burning calories at an incredible rate, maybe 300 calories in just these 10 minutes, for times normal. You're also sweating slightly under your layers, and that moisture is starting to freeze against your base layer, creating cold spots that conduct heat away from your skin. You realize you need to slow down, moderate your breathing, but you also need to move fast enough to generate body heat. Finding this balance in minus 71 is nearly impossible. Too slow, you freeze. Too fast, you sweat and freeze faster. 15 minutes in, the fingertip tingling has stopped in your right hand. This is bad. You can't feel 3 fingers at all. You try flexing them inside the mitten but get no sensory feedback, no confirmation they're moving. Frostbite is beginning. Ice crystals forming in the tissue, cells rupturing, damage accumulating. You know you should warm these fingers, tuck your hands into your armpits, but that means stopping, and stopping means freezing faster everywhere else. Hour 2, the cascade. 25 minutes in, you realize you're lost. The street you thought led to the hotel dead ends at a construction site. You need to backtrack, find another route. This adds 10 minutes to your journey, maybe 15. Your heart sinks, and that psychological blow matters. Hope is metabolic fuel. When it falters, your body falters too. You turn around, and the wind hits you. It's picked up, gusting to maybe 30 kilometers per hour. Not hurricane force, but at minus 71, even modest wind is devastating. The wind chill calculation doesn't really apply at this temperature. It's already so cold that wind just accelerates the inevitable, but subjectively, it feels like walking into a wall of knives. Your face, despite being covered, is in agony. The exposed skin around your eyes feels like it's being flayed. You close your eyes to slits, navigating by limited vision, and this makes navigation even harder. You stumble over ice you didn't see, nearly fall, catch yourself. The adrenaline spike makes your heart race, makes you breathe harder, makes you sweat more. 35 minutes in, you're getting confused. The streets look unfamiliar even though you've walked them before. This is the beginning of hypothermia affecting your cognition. Your core temperature has dropped from 37 degrees to maybe 35.5. Mild hypothermia, barely noticeable on a thermometer but significant for brain function. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and decision-making, is exquisitely sensitive to temperature drops. You take a turn that feels right but isn't. You're heading away from the hotel now, though you don't realize it yet. The confusion is subtle, not dramatic. You still think you're thinking clearly, that you're making good decisions. This is the danger of hypothermia, the lack of insight. You don't realize you're impaired until you're so impaired you can't recognize the impairment. 45 minutes in, you've lost feeling in both hands completely. Your feet are numb blocks inside your boots. When you walk, you can't really feel your feet hitting the ground, which makes each step uncertain, lurching. You look drunk, though you're sober. The muscles in your legs aren't responding properly either. The cold is affecting nerve conduction, making signals from brain to muscle slow and weak. You try to use your phone to call for help or check GPS, but your hands don't work well enough to remove it from your pocket. You get it out eventually, fumbling, nearly dropping it, but can't operate the touchscreen through your gloves. You remove one glove to unlock the phone, and the cold hits your exposed hand like a hammer. 15 seconds of exposure, and you can't make your fingers press the screen correctly. They're too cold, too stiff. The phone slips from your grasp, falls into snow, and you can't pick it up because your fingers won't close. You stare at it stupidly, knowing you need it, unable to make your body retrieve it. Hour 3, shutdown. 55 minutes in, you're sitting. You don't remember deciding to sit, but you're on the ground with your back against a building, and standing up feels impossible. Your core temperature is probably 33 degrees now, moderate hypothermia. Your body has stopped shivering, not because you're warm but because you've exhausted the glucose and ATP needed to power the shivering response. Without shivering, you're generating almost no metabolic heat. You're cooling rapidly. Your thinking is profoundly impaired now. Thoughts come slowly, disconnected, dreamlike. You know you should stand up, should keep moving, but the connection between knowing and doing has broken. Your brain is sending signals to your muscles, but those signals are getting lost in the cold, weak and scattered. You feel strangely peaceful. The pain has faded, not because conditions have improved, but because your nerve endings are too cold to transmit pain signals effectively. You're not suffering anymore, which feels like relief, which is the most dangerous feeling possible right now because suffering was motivating you to seek shelter. This is the phase where paradoxical undressing sometimes occurs. You don't feel cold. You feel almost normal, maybe even warm. Your body's temperature regulation has failed so completely that you've lost the sensation of being cold. If you were less clothed, you might start removing layers, but you're too weak to manage that. Instead, you just sit, watching your breath crystallize in the air in front of you, thinking vaguely that the ice crystals are very beautiful in the streetlight. 1 hour and 15 minutes in, your vision is blurring. This is partly because your eyes are freezing, yes, your eyes can freeze, and partly because your brain is shutting down non-essential functions. You're looking at the street in front of you but processing almost nothing. A car drives past, its headlights washing over you, but you don't think to wave, to call for help. The connection between seeing the car and recognizing it as potential rescue doesn't fire. Your core temperature is probably 31 degrees now. Your heart rate has dropped from its earlier stress-induced racing to maybe 40 beats per minute, slow and irregular. Your breathing is shallow, maybe 6 breaths per minute. You're in severe hypothermia, approaching the threshold where cardiac arrest becomes likely. Hour 4, the end. You're aware, in a distant sort of way, that you should be somewhere else. There's a warm place, you remember warmth, remember it exists, but you can't remember where it is or why it matters. You're comfortable here against this building. You might rest a little while longer. Just a little while. Your core temperature is 29 degrees. At this temperature, your heart is struggling. The cold makes blood viscous, harder to pump. The electrical signals coordinating heartbeats are disrupted by the cold, causing arrhythmias. Your heart might be beating in chaotic patterns, ventricular fibrillation that move blood ineffectively. Or it might just stop, sudden cardiac arrest, the final shutdown. You don't notice when your heart stops. You're barely conscious anyway, drifting in and out of awareness. The last thing you're aware of is not cold, not fear, not pain. It's just a vague sense of letting go, of releasing effort, of settling into something that feels almost like sleep. Your body will be found in the morning by street cleaning crews or early commuters. You'll be frozen solid, ice crystals throughout your tissues, skin hard as wood. Your eyes will be open, frost-covered. Your hands will be curled in the position they held when you stopped moving. The medical examiner will note advanced frostbite on your extremities, frozen tissue that would have required amputation if you'd survived, which you didn't. The cause of death will be listed as acute hypothermia secondary to environmental exposure, which is technically accurate but doesn't capture the cascade of failures that actually killed you. The confusion that made you get lost, the impaired judgment that made you sit down, the vasodilation failure that destroyed your hands, the core temperature drop that stopped your heart. You died from 1,000 small surrenders, each one reasonable in the moment, each one fatal in aggregate. Back in the hotel room, you shake yourself out of the visualization, disturbed by how vivid it was, how detailed your imagination made the death. Outside your actual window, the thermometer has bottomed out. -71.3 Celsius. The record is official. Yakutsk's coldest night in modern history. Your room is warm, almost oppressively so. The radiator clanks rhythmically, a sound you've grown to love. You're safe, protected by 18 inches of wall, by triple-pane windows, by a heating system burning coal and gas, by human ingenuity and infrastructure and the collective decision that people should be able to live here despite the cold's objections. But you understand now, in a way you didn't before, what's outside. Not just cold, not just a number on a thermometer. A specific, methodical process of shutting down human life, hour by hour, system by system, until nothing remains but a frozen shell that used to be someone who had plans, had a destination, had people expecting them to arrive. Sleep comes slowly, and when it does, you dream of walking through endless streets, searching for a hotel you can't quite find. Morning arrives with the news that 3 people died in last night's record cold. The hotel staff speak in hushed tones about it. A homeless man found frozen in a doorway, a drunk who passed out in a parking lot, and an elderly woman whose apartment heating failed and who couldn't reach her neighbors in time. The city mourns in its particular way, brief mentions in local news, a collective shaking of heads, the unspoken acknowledgement that winter claims its due. The temperature has moderated to -58, which after last night's -71 feels almost balmy. Dimitri texts that he's coordinating with search and rescue to show you what happens after someone goes missing in the cold, how the system responds, what they look for. Is educational, he writes, but also is difficult. You should know this. The search and rescue headquarters is a utilitarian building near the airport, staffed by a mix of professional emergency responders and volunteers who know the terrain. You're met by Captain Volkov, a weathered man in his 50s who's been running rescue operations for 23 years. His handshake is firm, his eyes assessing, evaluating whether you're someone who'll handle what you're about to hear or someone who'll need careful managing. Every winter, he begins without preamble, leading you to a conference room covered in topographic maps. We run maybe 40, 50 rescue operations, some successful, some not. Temperature like last night, we get 3 for callouts. People think they can manage, then realize they can't, then panic. If they call us in time, we save them. If they wait too long, he shrugs, a gesture that encompasses all the ways waiting too long ends. He pulls up a case file from 2 years ago. This is typical scenario. Hunter, experienced man, goes out on snowmobile to check trap lines. Temperature -55. Snowmobile breaks down. Fuel line freezes. Common problem. He is maybe 20 kilometers from nearest settlement. Has satellite phone, calls for help immediately. Smart. This is why he lives. The rescue operation took 4 hours, assembling the team, deploying the helicopter, which can barely fly in extreme cold but managed, locating the hunter via GPS coordinates, extracting him. When we find him, he is hypothermic but alive. Core temperature maybe 34 degrees. He stay with snowmobile, build small fire, stay moving. Does everything right. We warm him slowly in helicopter, bring to hospital. He loses 2 toes to frostbite, but he lives. Good outcome. Captain Volkov pulls up another file, his expression darkening. This is different case. Same year, 1 month later. Tourist, German woman, comes to photograph winter landscapes. Proper gear, satellite phone, tells hotel her route. She drives rental car to location, parks, walks maybe 2 kilometers to photograph frozen waterfall. Temperature -61. She takes photographs, loses track of time. When she decides to return, she cannot find car. Gets turned around, walks wrong direction. The search began when she missed her check-in time. We launch immediately. Volkov continues. We have her GPS coordinates from last check-in, but she moves from there. We search by helicopter, but in dark, -60, is very difficult. We see nothing. We search on snowmobiles, grid pattern, but area is large. We find her next morning. He pauses, seeming to decide how much detail to share. She is 3 kilometers from her car. Frozen, dead maybe 8 hours. But here is important part for you to understand. We can reconstruct her movement from tracks in snow. She walk in circles, literally. She pass within 50 meters of her car twice, but cannot see it in dark and snow. Finally, she stops walking. Probably can't walk anymore, too cold, too tired. She crawls under overhang of rock, tries to make shelter. We find her there, in what we call thermal refuge, place she choose to die. The concept of the last thermal refuge is forensically significant. When people freeze to death, they often make one final attempt at shelter in their last conscious moments. They crawl under overhangs into shallow depressions behind windbreaks, anywhere that offers even marginal protection. It's instinctive, perhaps, this need to shelter even when shelter comes too late. What we look for, Volkov explains, is understanding. We examine body position, location, tracks if visible. We try to understand their last thoughts, last decisions. Did they panic? Did they stay calm? Did they make good choices with bad information, or bad choices with good information? This helps us train others, helps us prevent next death. The German woman's body position suggested she'd remained relatively calm until the end. She'd arranged her backpack as a pillow, positioned herself to minimize wind exposure, even tried to cover herself with snow for insulation. Desperate measures that showed clear thinking despite impending death. The autopsy revealed advanced frostbite on her extremities and a core temperature at discovery of approximately -10 degrees. She'd been frozen solid for hours. Most difficult part of job, Volkov says quietly, is when we find children. Very rare, thank God, but happens. 3 years ago, boy, age 12, wanders from village during whiteout. Temperature -52. Is missing maybe 6 hours. We find him kilometer from village, frozen. He makes snow shelter, try to burrow in like he learned in school. Almost works, shelter is good construction, shows he is thinking clearly. But he is 12, small body, loses heat faster than adult. Not enough body mass. And he is wearing school clothes, not proper gear. The documentation shows a surprisingly sophisticated snow shelter for a child. A small cave dug into a drift with an entrance tunnel angled to block wind. Inside, the boy had packed the snow to create smooth walls, even attempted to seal gaps. It was textbook survival technique, exactly what he'd been taught. It just wasn't enough. We find him curled in corner of shelter. Volkov continues. Peaceful position, like sleeping. This is what we tell parents, that he looked peaceful, that he probably just went to sleep. Is true, but is also not complete truth. We don't tell them about the frostbite, about the ice in his lungs, about the desperation he must have felt before hypothermia made him calm. Scholars still argue about whether lying to families about death details is ethical or merciful. Some psychologists argue that grief processing requires truth, that sanitized versions of death prevent healthy acceptance. Others contend that unnecessary traumatic details serve no purpose and cause additional harm. Captain Volkov clearly falls in the latter camp. He tells families what they need for closure, not everything the autopsy reveals. He shows you photographs of recovery operations, and they're difficult to view. Bodies frozen in various positions. Sitting, lying, curled, even one standing, frozen mid-stride like a grotesque statue. Standing freezing is rare but happens, Volkov notes. Usually means very fast death, very extreme cold. Person stops moving, freezes so quickly they don't fall. Body becomes rigid while still upright. The forensic analysis of these bodies reveals patterns. Frostbite severity and distribution indicate how long the person survived and whether they tried to protect specific body parts. Ice crystal formation patterns in tissue show how quickly freezing occurred. Rapid freezing creates smaller crystals with less cell damage, while slow freezing creates large crystals that shred tissue more thoroughly. Stomach contents, if any, suggest how recently they'd eaten, which affects cold tolerance. Blood chemistry reveals hypothermia stages and whether alcohol or drugs were factors. We also look at what they remove, Volkov says, showing a photo of clothing scattered in the snow. This is paradoxical undressing. You know this term? Person feels too hot, removes clothing. Is sign of late-stage hypothermia, usually means they survive maybe 15-20 more minutes after removing clothing. When we find scattered clothing, we know body is probably close. The pattern is disturbingly consistent. Hat discarded first, then jacket, then boots, each item marking the progression toward death. Rescue teams use this as a tracking method. Finding discarded clothing means they're on the right trail, getting closer, though usually too late. Captain Volkov pulls up a map of Yakutia showing search and rescue statistics by region. Urban areas like Yakutsk, we have maybe 70% survival rate for callouts. We respond fast, infrastructure is close. Rural areas, villages, remote locations, maybe 40% survival. Too far, too difficult to reach in time. And in true wilderness, no settlements, no roads, 10-15%. If you get in trouble out there, you probably die before we can reach you. The mathematics are brutal but logical. A helicopter at full speed can cover maybe 200 kilometers per hour in good weather, but in -60 with wind, maybe 100 kilometers per hour if it can fly at all. A snowmobile team can manage 40 kilometers per hour on prepared trails, half that in deep snow or rough terrain. If someone is 50 kilometers from the nearest settlement and has been exposed for an hour before calling for help, the rescue window is vanishingly small. Worst callouts, Volkov says, are when we know we cannot arrive in time. Person calls, they are injured, they are cold, they know they are dying. We are coming, but we calculate that we need 3 hours and they have maybe 90 minutes. We talk to them on satellite phone, try to keep them calm, keep them awake, keep them fighting. We talk until they stop responding, and we keep coming anyway because maybe they survive. Sometimes they do. Usually they don't. He describes a case from 5 years ago where a geologist fell through weak ice into water, managed to pull himself out, called for rescue. The temperature was -58, and he was soaking wet. We calculate he has maybe 45 minutes before hypothermia kills him. We are 90 minutes away. We tell him, strip off wet clothing immediately, wring it out, put it back on. Build fire if possible. Keep moving. We talk him through everything. His voice gets slower, more slurred. He stopped making sense after 30 minutes. Stopped responding after 40. We find him 55 minutes after his call. Dead, frozen, phone still in his hand. The cruelty of that, being on the phone with rescuers, knowing help is coming, and dying anyway because physics and distance and temperature don't negotiate, is almost unbearable to contemplate. But it's the reality of Yakutian rescue work, the math that won't be cheated. What I tell people, Volkov says, is this: in Yakutia you are always maximum 2 hours from death. Maybe less. Even in city, even with help close, if you are outside in wrong conditions you have 2 hours. 2 hours from making mistake to dying is not much time. so you must not make mistakes. The 2-hour rule appears repeatedly in cold survival literature. It's not precise, individual variation, exact conditions, clothing quality, all these factors matter. But as a general principle, it's reliable. At extreme cold, unprotected humans have approximately 1 to 3 hours of functional time before hypothermia becomes severe enough to cause death. Captain Volkov walks you to the equipment room, showing the gear rescue teams deploy, thermal imaging cameras to detect body heat through snow and darkness, emergency heating blankets that run on chemical reactions, portable shelters that deploy in seconds, medical supplies for treating severe hypothermia in the field. But best equipment, he says, tapping his head, is knowledge, knowing where to search, how to read tracks, how to think like lost person. We train for this, practice scenarios, study psychology of people in extreme stress. There's a wall in the equipment room covered with photographs, rescue team members who've died on operations. 7 faces in 23 years. We lose people too, Volkov says quietly. Helicopter crash in whiteout. Snowmobile breaks through ice. Heart attack in extreme cold is common, cold stress on heart is severe. Rescuer becomes victim. We know risk, we accept it, but we remember. These people die trying to save others. Is worth remembering. As you prepare to leave, Volkov offers final thoughts. People ask me why anyone lives here, why we don't all move somewhere warm. I tell them, humans live everywhere, always have. We live in deserts, in jungles, on mountains, in Arctic. We adapt, we survive, we build communities. Yakutia is extreme, yes, but is also beautiful, rich in resources, full of people with strength and knowledge. Cold teaches you things. Teaches you to pay attention, to plan ahead, to help neighbors, to respect nature. Maybe world would be better if everyone learned these lessons. There's a romantic notion in that philosophy, this idea that harsh environments create better people through necessary cooperation and vigilance. The truth is probably more complex. Harsh environments also create casualties, trauma, and suffering. But there's also undeniable truth in the observation that Yakutian communities possess resilience and mutual support systems that many comfortable societies have lost. Back in Dmitri's car, driving through streets where life continues despite temperatures that would shut down most cities, you think about the bodies under snow, about the last thermal refuges, about the scattered clothing marking trails to frozen deaths. You think about Captain Volkov's matter-of-fact recitation of horrors, the professional detachment that probably saves his sanity but can't completely hide the weight he carries. Tomorrow, Dmitri says, I show you why people stay despite all this. Not just survival, why we choose to live here, what makes it worth the risk. But tonight, you're thinking about the German photographer circling her car in the dark, about the 12-year-old building his textbook snow shelter, about the geologist on the phone knowing help won't arrive in time. You're thinking about the 2-hour rule, about the margin between mistake and death being measured in minutes. Outside, the cold continues its patient work, indifferent to human stories, waiting for the next mistake, the next victim, the next name for the memorial stone. The temperature has climbed, if you can call it that, to minus 43 Celsius. After the record-breaking minus 71, this feels almost temperate, and Dmitri confirms that this is exactly how Yakutians think. Minus 40 is comfortable, he says with a grin that's only half joking. Is good day for walking, for being outside a little. You become calibrated differently here. Your scale shifts. He's taking you to meet his grandmother, the woman whose traditional Doha coat you examined days ago. She lives in a small house on the city's outskirts, one of the older structures built before the modern elevated apartment blocks became standard. The house sits directly on the ground, built before engineers fully understood permafrost dynamics, and has settled unevenly over the decades, giving it a slightly drunken lean that somehow adds to its character rather than detracting. Grandmother Serdana is 84 years old, small and compact, with a face that tells stories of winters survived and summers savored. She greets you in Saka, which Dmitri translates, and ushers you into a home that's warm, cluttered with decades of living, and smells like wood smoke and tea and something baking that makes your mouth water. Babushka wants to feed you, Dmitri says unnecessarily. She's already setting out plates, pouring tea from a samovar that's probably older than you are, arranging small pastries filled with meat and onions. She says you are too thin, that you need fat for winter. She doesn't understand you are leaving soon, that you don't need to prepare for winter here. But you eat anyway because refusing would be rude and because the food is genuinely delicious, hearty, rich, the kind of cooking that understands calories or survival. Sardana watches with satisfaction as you eat, occasionally adding more to your plate, and begins speaking in Saka, with Dimitri translating in real time. She says you want to know why we live here, yes? Why we stay in this cold place when world has warm places. Dimitri translates. She says is simple. This is home. Not home like place you choose, home like place that made you, that holds your ancestors, that knows your name. You don't leave home because it's difficult. You leave home only when you forget why it matters. Sardana was born in 1941 in a village 200 kilometers from Yakutsk, during the height of World War II, when resources were scarce and survival was even more precarious than usual. Her father was away fighting the Germans. Her mother was raising 3 children alone, and they survived winters without adequate food or fuel through a combination of traditional knowledge, community support, and what Sardana describes, through Dimitri's translation, as stubbornness that winter could not break. She says her mother knew every plant, every animal, every sign in the sky. Dimitri translates. Knew when snow would come by how birds flew. Knew which ice was safe by sound it made. Knew how to make fire from almost nothing, how to keep children warm when fuel was gone. This knowledge, she says, is worth more than all the modern technology because technology fails but knowledge lives in your mind forever. Sardana gestures animatedly as she speaks, her hands creating shapes in the air, demonstrating how to build a proper fire, how to arrange sleeping bodies for maximum shared warmth, how to read wind patterns in snow drifts. Dimitri struggles to keep up with the translation and eventually gives up trying to be precise, instead conveying the essence. Traditional survival knowledge encoded in gesture and story, passed from grandmother to mother to daughter for generations. After war, things improved. Dimitri continues translating. Soviet Union built infrastructure, brought electricity, brought coal for heating. But Babushka says this made people weak, made them forget how to be truly Saka. Young people now, she says, they cannot survive without their phones, without their cars, without their heated buildings. They are Saka by blood, but not by knowledge. It's a common lament among indigenous elders worldwide, the erosion of traditional knowledge as younger generations adopt modern conveniences. But in Yakutia, the stakes feel higher because the traditional knowledge being lost is literally survival information. Sardana's generation could survive in -60 with minimal equipment because they knew how. Many younger Yakutians, for all their modern advantages, would die within hours if infrastructure failed and they had to rely on traditional methods. Dimitri's grandmother retrieves a bundle from a cupboard, unwrapping layers of cloth to reveal objects. A knife with a bone handle, worn smooth by decades of use. A fire-starting kit using flint and char cloth. A small bag of something that Dimitri identifies as dried fat mixed with berries. Emergency supplies, he explains. She keeps these always, even now, even with modern life. Says you never know when you'll need old ways. The knife is particularly interesting. Sardana demonstrates its versatility, showing how the blade can strip bark, clean fish, cut leather, even strike the flint for fire starting. A good knife, Dimitri translates, is more valuable than gold in winter. You can make fire, make shelter, make food with good knife. Gold is pretty but useless when you are freezing. There's a historical dimension to this that's worth noting. During the Siberian fur trade era in the 17th and 18th centuries, metal knives became one of the most valuable trade goods. Indigenous Siberians would trade stacks of premium furs, sable, ermine, fox, for a single well-made steel knife because the utility value was so enormous. Scholars debate whether this trade was exploitation or fair exchange, but from the indigenous perspective, the knives were worth the furs because they multiplied survival efficiency dramatically. Sardana makes more tea and begins telling a story, her voice taking on the rhythmic quality of practiced storytelling. Dimitri translates. She is telling about winter of 1947, worst winter she remembers. Temperature stayed below -60 for 6 weeks straight. Never got warmer. Village was isolated, no contact with outside, no supplies coming. They survived on stored food from previous year, on hunting when possible, on community sharing everything. The 1947 winter is documented in Soviet records as one of the most severe in Siberian history, though exact data from remote areas is sparse. Anecdotal reports suggest temperatures approached -75 in some locations, sustained for weeks. The human cost was significant. Estimated thousands of deaths across Siberia, many unreported or underreported in official statistics. 3 families in her village died that winter. Dmitry translates soberly. Not from starvation, not from cold directly, from giving up. They stayed in their homes, didn't come to community gatherings, didn't ask for help. When spring came, they found them frozen in their beds. Had food left, had fuel left, but had lost will to continue. Babushka says this is what really kills in winter. Not the cold outside, but the cold inside, the cold in the spirit. This observation aligns with research on survival psychology in extreme conditions. Physical challenges can be endured almost indefinitely if psychological resilience remains intact, but psychological breakdown leads to physical death surprisingly quickly. The families who died in Sardana's village had the resources to survive, but lacked the community connection and psychological fortitude to maintain survival behaviors. Her village survived, Dmitry continues, because they shared everything, supported each other, forced each other to stay active, to come to gatherings, to remain part of community. They would go to families who seemed weak, bring them food, make them talk, make them remember they were not alone. This is the Saka way, we survive together or die alone. Sardana speaks again, and Dmitry's translation becomes more animated. She says the cold is a teacher. It teaches you that you are small, that nature is powerful, that you must be smart and careful and respectful. But it also teaches you what matters: family, community, preparation, knowledge. In warm places, she says, people forget these things. They become soft, lazy, they think technology will save them from everything. Here, we know better. We know we are always one power failure, one bad storm, one broken heater away from death. This knowledge makes us strong. There's a philosophy here that's worth contemplating as you settle into your blankets tonight, wherever you are in the world. Sardana's argument is that hardship, while unpleasant, creates resilience and clarity about what truly matters. It's an old argument: what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But in Yakutia, it has literal truth. Those who survive extreme winters are, by definition, those who've learned the necessary lessons. The alternative is death, which provides very clear feedback about inadequate preparation or knowledge. But there's also survivorship bias in this thinking. The people Sardana remembers are the survivors, the ones whose knowledge worked, whose community held together, who had enough resilience to continue. The ones who died don't get to share their stories, don't get to explain what knowledge they lacked or what resilience failed them. The narrative of hardship creating strength is told by those strong enough to survive the hardship, which creates a circular logic that's difficult to challenge. Dmitry's grandmother brings out photo albums, yellowed pages filled with black and white images of village life, of people in traditional clothing, of reindeer and sleds and smoke rising from Uraha dwellings. She points to faces, naming people long dead, telling stories in rapid Saka that Dmitry can't translate fast enough. The photos document a way of life that's largely vanished, replaced by modern Yakutsk with its apartments and heating plants and internet connectivity. She doesn't think the old way was better in all things, Dmitry clarifies. She likes electricity, likes modern medicine, likes that her grandchildren don't die from diseases that killed her siblings. But she thinks something has been lost too: connection to land, understanding of nature, self-reliance. She worries what happens if the modern system fails, if the heating stops, if the supply trucks stop coming. Who will know how to survive then? It's a legitimate concern, and one that climate change makes more pressing. As Arctic temperatures warm and permafrost thaws, the infrastructure that keeps Yakutsk habitable becomes increasingly precarious. Building foundations settle as permafrost melts. Heating pipes warp and break. Roads buckle and crack. The city is spending enormous sums on maintenance and retrofitting, but there's genuine question whether Yakutsk can survive as a major urban center if warming continues. Some researchers project that by 2100, Permafrost degradation could make much of Yakutsk uninhabitable without completely rebuilding infrastructure. A multi-billion-dollar undertaking that might not be economically viable. The alternative is managed retreat, abandoning the city, relocating the population. But relocating 300,000 people who consider this home, who've built their lives here, who have deep cultural and ancestral connections to the land, that's not just logistics, it's cultural destruction. Sardana speaks again, and Dmitri translates. She says she won't live to see what happens. She's made her peace with that. But she worries for her grandchildren, for their children. She says if they remember the old knowledge alongside the new technology, maybe they have chance. But if they forget, if they rely only on machines and systems that can fail, then winter will teach them the hard way, the way that kills. The afternoon light, such as it is in January, begins to fade, and Dmitri indicates it's time to go. Sardana hugs you goodbye, a surprisingly strong embrace from someone so small and elderly, and presses something into your hand. It's a small carved figure, a reindeer made from bone, worn smooth by handling. Dmitri translates. She says this is for remembering. Remember that people can live anywhere, can survive anything, if they have knowledge and community and will. Take this back to your warm place and remember the cold place. Remember the people who choose to live here not because it's easy but because it's home. Driving back through the city as twilight deepens into night, you turn the bone reindeer over in your fingers, feeling its smoothness, its weight. Dmitri is quiet, letting you process. The city lights bloom against the darkness, each building a small fortress of warmth holding back the cold. Do you understand now? Dmitri finally asks. Why we stay? And you realize you do, at least partly. It's not just inertia or economics or lack of options. It's identity, culture, the deep human need to belong somewhere, to be from somewhere. It's the pride of surviving what others can't. The knowledge that you're part of a long line of people who looked at impossible conditions and said, we'll manage. It's the beauty of -70 sunrises, the clarity of frozen air, the northern lights dancing in skies so dark and clear they feel infinite. It's community forged in shared struggle, relationships deepened by mutual dependence. It's also, you understand, grief for what's being lost as climate changes, as traditional knowledge fades, as young people leave for warmer, easier places. Grief mixed with determination, the stubborn insistence that Yakutia will endure because Yakutians endure, because they always have. Back in your hotel room, you place the bone reindeer on the nightstand where you can see it. Tomorrow you leave Yakutsk, flying south to warmth and comfort and a life where winter is an inconvenience, not an existential threat. But tonight you're still here, still in the city that shouldn't exist but does, still listening to the radiator's familiar clank, still watching the thermometer's glow showing -45 and holding steady. Outside, the cold waits, patient as always, testing every seal and barrier, claiming the unwary and unlucky, teaching lessons to those who survive. 300,000 people have collectively decided that the cold won't win, that they'll live here despite everything, burning their coal and gas, maintaining their systems, helping their neighbors, passing down their knowledge. The cold doesn't care about human determination. It presses against the window, against the walls, seeping through microscopic gaps, trying to reclaim the space that humans have stolen with their heating and insulation and stubborn refusal to leave. But for tonight, the humans win. The buildings stay warm, the pipes stay liquid, the lights stay on. 300,000 small victories against the dark and cold. Victories that will need to be won again tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until spring finally returns. And even as you begin to drift towards sleep, warm and safe in your elevated fortress, you're thinking about Sardana's words about the cold being a teacher, about hardship creating strength, about the importance of remembering. You're thinking about the bone reindeer, about hands that carved it decades ago, about the tradition of gifting travelers something to remember by. You're thinking about the German photographer and the 12-year-old boy and Valentina on her bench and all the others whose names are carved on stone or lost to history, who made small mistakes or large ones or simply had terrible luck, whose stories ended in the cold instead of beside a warm radiator like yours. The city breathes around you, 300,000 people sleeping or waking or working through the night, each one a small furnace burning calories, generating heat, refusing to freeze. The collective warmth of human life and activity and determination creating islands of habitability in a landscape that, left to itself, would be empty and frozen and silent. And somewhere out there in the darkness beyond the city lights, the taiga stretches endlessly. Frozen larch forests and tundra and permafrost that holds the memory of mammoths, holding secrets and stories and the bones of countless lives lived and lost in this impossible place. The cold presses on, patient and eternal, but tonight it doesn't win. Tonight, you sleep warm in Yakutsk, the city at the edge of survivability, the place where humans looked at -70 and said, "We'll build a home here anyway." And in the morning, when you wake, the sun will attempt its brief appearance, casting golden light across ice and snow, reminding everyone that even in the coldest, darkest winter, light returns. Spring always returns. Eventually, the radiator clanks one final time, a reassuring sound, and you let your eyes close. Let sleep take you, warm and safe and grateful for walls and windows and human ingenuity and the simple, profound gift of shelter from the cold. Tomorrow is another story, another place, another temperature. But tonight, you've survived Yakutia, learned its lessons, carried its stories into your memory where they'll live alongside the bone reindeer in your pocket. Small talismans of endurance, of survival, of the remarkable human capacity to adapt and persist and create home, even where home seems impossible. The cold outside doesn't diminish. It never does. It simply waits, teaching patience to anyone listening, reminding the city that comfort is temporary, that warmth is one not given, that survival is a choice renewed every hour of every day through the long Yakutian winter. And with that thought, with the image of Sardana's weathered hands and Captain Volkov's wall of fallen rescuers and Dmitri's patient explanations and the memorial stone with its many names, with the understanding that you've touched the edge of something ancient and demanding and ultimately unknowable from the safety of warm rooms and departing flights, with all of this settling into your bones like cold into poorly insulated walls, you drift finally into deep sleep. The kind of sleep that comes from exhaustion and relief and the profound gratitude of those who've glimpsed danger but remained safe, who've learned what -70 means but never had to truly live it, who can carry the stories without bearing the cost. Sleep well, traveler. You've earned it. The cold has taught its lessons for tonight, and tomorrow, warm, distant tomorrow, will come soon enough, bringing new stories, new places, new temperatures where humans somehow, impossibly, miraculously continue to build their homes and live their lives and tell their tales of survival against the odds. The wind outside shifts, the building settles, the night deepens, and you sleep on, dreaming perhaps of reindeer carved from bone, of ice crystals forming fractals in frozen air, of cities built on stilts above frozen earth, of people whose strength comes from knowing exactly how fragile warmth and life and safety truly are, and choosing to protect them anyway, hour after hour, day after day, winter after winter, generation after generation. Sweet dreams.